There
Can
we
we get a
go.
confirmation?
Yep, I'm loading in right now. Yep, I see it.
Yeah,
All
it's
right,
in.
all right. Thank you, thank you. All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, let's get this kicked off, and if any issues happen, we'll just have to pivot, figure it out as we go. All right. Anora, you see the screen as well?
Yes, I do.
Perfect. Okay, let me just pull up the chat here so I see everybody. And everyone can see, right? Can I get a confirmation? Can I get some ones in the chat or something? Is that what the streamers say? All right, I see 1-1. That's good enough for me. All right, thank you. All right, so today we're going to be going over the opening concepts and some situations. We're going to try to make this as practical as we can, but I do think it's important for people that are improving, trying to learn the game, to have some conceptual ideas when they're dealing with scenarios, right? Because every move you make in Catan, there are nuances to it. There's no black and white answer. I don't care how many times you've played. There are many ways that you could chop this up. You could say, I need to take a right or I need to take a left. And it's just important to know kind of what are the key concepts and themes when you reach those points. We are willing to take any questions that come up. So if you do have a question, ping it in the chat. Let us know. We'll pick it up during the presentation. And then we'll be also looking at the submitted board reviews. So any boards that were submitted to us from the strategy channel, we will be reviewing those and going through them. And then finally, we'll be playing some games. At least one game with the Nora driving, and if we play a second one, I'll drive the second game and go through my thought process there. All right. Now, I just want to review some key concepts. Again, Catan has a lot of nuance to it. So I want people to remember that the answer to everything here is it depends. And I think it's important that when you are dealing with situations, to always have an open mind that there might be multiple answers, multiple perspectives. This was one of the original slides going through some of the key opening concepts. Like I said, we are going to be closing the opening today. So we're pretty much going to close this chapter. And we're going to also add a whole new, let's say, mindset and principle into your quiver, so to speak. Now, on the previous lesson, we looked at probability. And essentially what we said was all our decisions, everything we do comes from the idea that there's probability in the dice, right? When we pick a 6-9-5, we are picking those placements because we know that, from a probability standpoint, those numbers will roll the most. Right? So we have a certain expectation when we place or when we pair numbers together, kind of what's going to happen. And if for whatever reason the probability shifted, right? Like let's say 12s were just as strong as 6s, it changes the entire dynamic of the game. So I just want to bring this back up to say, hey, you have to respect probability and know how that works. And if you have questions about that, we actually went into depth on the previous lesson. So definitely check that out.
Now, as tempting as it is to hop on the 11 brick bandwagon and say that 10s never roll, which I know Kelly is a big proponent of, you do have to respect the dice because whenever you don't, it'll come back to bite you at critical moments.
This is true. But I mean, look, 11 is a number. It does have probability into it, so it should roll at some frequency. Just, place at your own risk. Now, the new thing I want to bring into this lesson today, and this is going to be one of the main themes to close out the opening, is kind of like a two-part principle. The first part is what we call the 1% better mindset, which is everything you do in life, but let's be more localized to Catan. Everything you do in Catan, it's really about making your position just 1% better, right? The great players that play, they know how to just make little micro improvements to their position within their trade deals. And ultimately, that 1% is going to compound and compound to give you momentum. Now, equally, every decision you make, whether it's 1% in either direction, there's always a butterfly effect. There's always this, it has a cascading, it might have an implication or result today, but there also might be future consequences of you making that action, right? If you decide to plow somebody and they get upset, just know that that person that's upset could come back to haunt you later down in the game. So keep in mind of this 1% principle and this butterfly effect. And really our goal is to maximize making the best decisions we possibly can and get that positive compounding effect and momentum and favorability on the table. Oh, Kelly going for it. Hubsy, how we doing, man? By the way, Hubs, I hope it's all right with you. I've used some of your boards from our our kind of lesson that we had the other day. So a lot of examples that we broke down and in depth. We're gonna we have on the masterclass, which I think you'll appreciate. This is one of the key concepts, though, right? 1% improvement, and also remember that butterfly effect, the consequence effect. All right, opening concepts. Honora, I had a really hard time with this one because I feel like there's so many things we could talk about. Like originally when I did this list,
Oh yeah.
I probably had like 10 things on here or 12
Yep.
things. I had a lot. And as I was doing it, I was like, you know what? We need to chop it because I want it to be as kind of to the point as principled as I can be without being too much here. And I think I've got a pretty good list here, right? And I think these are themes when you're playing your games that will happen more than the 80% of the time. So we're going to go through these different themes. We're going to talk about some of the different nuances. And of course, again, questions that come up, feel free to let us know. I found something not on there playing to your playstyle. Well, keep in mind
And
this
that
is
counts.
opening.
Yeah. And
Um,
I mean that counts to every move matters anyways. So because sometimes you're really uncomfortable playing a certain way, and that means that if you know yourself well enough to know that oh, I really really struggle with good decision making when I'm playing, road builder or something, when I'm trying to defend road, then that may mean that you need to try to steer clear of that. Although it is a very useful skill to have and one that you will want to develop. But I mean, that's still I mean, playing to your play style is still something that's worth mentioning.
and I think we're probably going to really break that particular topic down more in the middle game
Yeah.
because there's a lot of nuances about play style, personality that come out in the middle game that you might not see as
Yeah.
much in the opening, where it's more about people are just trying to get their setup moving, so to speak. But let's dive in. Let's go through these concepts. We're gonna go kind of quickly through them. We have examples for a lot of them as well, so hopefully that should help illustrate a few different points. The first one, I put this one in first because I feel this is a loved and hated topic at the same time, the plow.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what plowing is, essentially it's when you place on somebody's potential hex that they're building to, or maybe you take a port, like for instance over here in the bottom right hand corner. This person got crazy and decided just to one hex goon it onto the sheep port. That is a version of the plow. Or maybe you get plowed and then you decide to counter plow somebody. These are all plows that can happen. And there's a very interesting conversation about when you should do it and when you should not do it. So, to plow or not to plow. I want this to be known that you can get plowed at any point in the game. But from my standpoint, and what I've seen is that plowing early on is probably one of the most forceful things that you can do in the entire game, in the opening phase. But there are pros and cons. And again, this is going back to the nuance aspect of making decisions. Some of the cons, or someone, let's start with the pros. Expansion, right? If let's say you plow to a 3 hex spot, that is an expansion opportunity for more production, but also a point. Plowing people will weaken the person that you're plowing on some level. You do have the road potential play, right? By using your roads in that sense. And then there's also some deal making opportunities where if you have the plow on somebody, maybe instead of plowing them, you can make a deal that's advantageous for the player, but also more advantageous for you. There's been cases where instead of plowing somebody, they've traded me a full city not to do it. And in that case, that was worth it for me and it was worth it for them to save their settle spots. Now,
And there are some, just like he's saying, you don't even necessarily have to complete the plow. Sometimes simply the threat of the plow is enough. I had a game where in my second placement, um, I set up as if I was going to plow an opposing player with a free road, and I didn't really want the spot.
mhm.
Definitely not more than I wanted my other expansion opportunities from my first settlement. And so I was able to use the fact that I had the free road with the plow opportunity to trade my other starting card for a rare resource. And with that, I was able to then use a road that I needed to point some direction off my second settlement that I figured I was never really going to use anyways,
Mhm.
and get a free trade out of it. And when you do commit a plow, it is one of the it has is one of the strongest domino effects. It has early actions you can take in the game, where
Absolutely.
it can kind of dictate the whole course of the game through this plow. And that's why you see so many people who look for plowing opportunities, because they want to have that kind of power over the direction the game's going to take.
Yeah, there's actually a player in D1. I'm not going to say his name, but I'll say his nickname, which is the Plowster. And anyone that plays in the Championship League and has played there for some time knows who I'm talking about. But all he would do is plow. Like that's all he looked for. Like in the opening, in the middle game, the end game, and he would just piss people off. And I think this is a good segue to the cons of it, which is if you do it too much or you're too forceful with something in the early stages when someone's just trying to get their setup and moving, it could have a really tough chilling effect. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, I would recommend looking at Hakuna Matata's YouTube video on the chilling effect, which is essentially you do something that pushes people away from you and ultimately pisses them off. That's maybe the quickest way I can summarize it. So be careful of that, right? The negative effects from a social perspective. Secondly, usually when you get a big plow, let's say to a 3 hex or a really strong port, it also will heighten you as a threat, right? Because you've lowered someone else's threat levels, you've at the same time heightened yours. So you just have to be aware that that could bring you some more robs or unnecessary robber activity.
One of the things that we'll be talking about, in a moment, is pacing, and might be a term that you've heard of before. But plowing, especially to a 3 hex spot or a really strong port spot, like an 8-10 3-1 port or something like that, um, even when you haven't actually settled there yet, it has a pacing effect where people see you as if you're running ahead with the game, because you have just dramatically increased, the foundation of your setup.
Yeah,
You've secured a strong spot for you yet, even though you don't actually have it yet. It does draw a lot of attention to you.
correct. And then the last piece of that as well, Nora, and this is one I don't think it's appreciated enough, is when you hurt a player, let's say with a plow, or anything that, let's say, diminishes someone's potential, you have to consider what is the imbalance from a win con perspective, right? Like if that person is needed to fight army, with someone else on the board and you hurt them, well, now the person who's taking army might have a clear advantage while you're trying to fight for road, and that could actually hurt your overall chances. So again, I want you to start thinking about this from multi-dimensional, so to speak, to say like, just because there's a plow there doesn't mean it's the right move in that moment. You need to consider multiple variations. But I will say, more often than not, getting useful ports or high production settlement spots tends to be advantageous on the whole, I would say. So some real quick considerations. We don't have to go through all of these, but these are some things that as I was sitting down with this slide, I went through and said, okay, what are some things that I'm thinking about before I make a big plow play, right? And I'm thinking, am I making the plow against a player who I think is very strong, right? Is this to kind of balance the board in a way that everybody wins? Or how does the board feel about this plow, right? Is it bringing me some kind of bad social capital? Can I use the extra production from the plow efficiently? These are things that I'm considering. Also, if I plow a player, am I giving up maybe a different settlement spot where that happens a lot, Honora, whereas we'll take a plow on a 3 hex, but then we'll lose the port in the process. And it's like, it might not have been as worth it as we thought.
Mhm.
Again, you can go back, look at some of the considerations here. And of course, we'd love if anyone goes through this again and has questions. We'd love to start, that conversation. But here's some things to consider. And was there any questions as far as plows? Kramer was saying, "Oh boy, I know." To be fair, there are worse plowers than him these days. This
Yeah,
is
he's
true,
talking about the Plouster. Yeah.
the plowster, but at least you know who it is, which just shows you the power of the plow.
Yeah. And, of that chilling effect, that everybody remembers.
Oh yeah, and this is, I would say, in a tournament situation, making these big overt moves like this, maybe not as big of a deal, but when you play in a league with players that know you and you develop a reputation, You just have to be careful of how you build that reputation, right? All right, so that's plowing. Some different considerations, pros and cons. Let's go to the blocking the robber. So the way I look at the robber in the opening phase is this will set the pace of the game as we transition to middle game, right? Who gets blocked, what spots get blocked, what steals happen, what deals are made. This can dramatically change. Again, this is going back to the butterfly effect, right? What's happening in that one moment can have a domino effect down the road. And the biggest thing I want to point out is, and Honora, I'd love your take on this, right? We've got a couple key things here as far as deals. Um, I really like this idea of blocking based on usefulness and not just the number. Where I feel like
Hmm.
what I've seen is a lot of players, two players on an eight, they'll just block the eight because it's
Oh
two
yeah.
players on an eight. But are they really thinking about, is that the most useful block? And I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on that.
Well, there's a lot of like things that make people block errantly. So there's the one you're talking about where people will say, well, it's a shared eight ore. Like ore is one of the strongest resources in the game, um, and there's two people on it, and
Mm-hmm.
I need to block it. And while often a shared eight ore is a good block, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best place for you to put the robber right now. And another really common thing is people say, "Oh, the six is rolling like crazy, so I need to block it so that it stops." Well, I mean, if it's rolling like crazy, they already have those resources. Like they don't need more. You need to block the complementary resources, things like that. Like if somebody's got a six ore and it's rolling like nuts,
Yeah.
and you want to hit like their 10 wheat or whatever it is that they don't have, because as it stands they're just going to have to 4-1 the ore away, and that really really mitigates the fact that the ore has been rolling so much. And so like, I mean, you definitely always block based off of usefulness, and the idea that you should never solo block early as well, um, is also something that you need to evaluate for yourself. Now, I know the solo versus shared block says right up there, it says early shared blocks tend to give you more favorable board presence, and that's true. It does help you with your diplomacy because people don't feel like they're being singled out.
Exactly.
But I would say one of the few really big changes that I made in season two that gave me a lot of success was I resolved that I was not going to be scared of solo blocks if it was the block that needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would often do is I would use crippling blocks on one person after another. I would solo block on one person and then move the solo block to somebody else later, and because it hampers so much more sometimes when you're hitting the appropriate spot as opposed to just shared spots. So that it is definitely, you always need to evaluate from a usefulness perspective, not off of from sort of a holistic perspective,
Yeah.
not just what's the big numbers, who's got the most points, who can I steal a card from, you look at all of it and figure out what's going to give me the best chances to win.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and by the way, just because I did state that like early shared blocks tends to give you more favorable board presence, that was not saying I favor necessarily shared blocks. It's just saying
Yeah.
that's usually in the early stages. If you don't want to shake the board too much and you want to get on everyone's good side for the future, usually shared blocks tends to be the more holistic, like the more go-to strategy. But there are definitely cases where maybe somebody has a very dominant setup that needs to be stopped. Then it's okay to solo block maybe that eight ore that they're sitting on, which will give them the ability to drop cities and development cards over everyone else. So I do think this is a very underappreciated concept of blocking, which is usefulness. And I'm hoping as we go through more examples, we play more games, that we really try to highlight where are the useful blocks and the useful moments, right? Because it is dynamic as well. It's not just static in the sense that we always block the eight because there are two people on it. You need to kind of
Yeah.
know what are people's hands and what are they playing for, and where does the block belong in that moment. All right, so we're gonna do some examples here. This is I feel like where people tend to sit up a little bit in their chair and take a look. So this I'm gonna show some examples from the semis game of last weekend's community tournament. So we have the semis and the finals. We'll have some examples there as well. I am blue here, GM Pied Piper. That is one of my accounts. And I have a decision to make here. Where am I blocking? Right? Maybe some people can give me some quick ideas, and there's no one right answer. But usually when I'm looking at blocking spots, I'm considering what are the shared spots and then what are also the solo blocks that might make sense in that given moment. 8 or looks good. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's you, Drew, so, and ABH is in this game, so obviously you're going to be solo blocking ABH, right?
All right, well, let's get the
Uh,
answers in first.
I gotta stir the pot here.
Thanks, Honora. Thank you very much for doing that. So here's some things to keep in mind, right? Yes, I think the 8 or is a fantastic block, and what I'm going to show is wait, let's see. I can see the wheat just rolled. To be
Yeah, it's a
fair,
good point.
I didn't roll a 7 here necessarily. I'm just kind of it's a static moment of where should I block in the early stages.
Yeah. But you're
And,
kind of thinking, if I roll a 7 here on my turn, you want to already have it figured out in case you want to do any kind of verbal deals. You only have a limited timer, so you want to have a good idea of where you want to block anyways.
yeah, yeah. And I think there's some pretty clear spots. And I'll talk through kind of what I figured out here. All right. So there's 5 key spots that we need to consider. Another option is always block the early expansion spot. So wood and brick. Crane is starting to throw in some dynamicism into the mix here. So there's 5 spots that I considered, right, in the early stages. The 8 or is definitely a fantastic block. I think hitting the 2 players here it's makes a lot of sense. It's going to stop the city's development cards. The 5 wheat was also a shared block I considered. The only problem with that is I have low wheat, so I wanted to potentially keep wheat open for myself, and I found red was really open to make some trades with me for a couple different reasons. So I thought, okay, maybe leaving that open was more advantageous than not. And then the last shared one was the 10 sheep, which I think is a good spot in terms of slowing down development cards, maybe slowing down some of the settles, and giving my sheep a lot more value. Now, the other 2 spots are solo blocks, and one of them is on the 10 wood. And this is not really priority, but the only thing I would think here is if I'm racing for the wheat port, which I was, then stopping the wood and brick production of black could be an option. And the last one is the 5 wood on ABH, which that's a fun spot, right?
Doesn't cause any problems after the
No,
game.
no problems in the early stages at 2 points. Now, the reason I consider the 5 wood, though, it's actually, I think, pretty principled in the sense that ABH has this fantastic road network. And the thing is, if he gets the 10-3-11 and he gets the 3-1, because I already know black wants the wheat port, so ABH has pretty much free reign on this, and no one's challenging him for the 3-10-11, then that might be a really big problem to my play on road as a side-by-side player.
And also because he placed second on the 9-4-11, he's already got a brick in hand. So the wood is a pretty important block. In this case.
So that is a consideration. My only problem is, and I end up, just so everyone knows, I end up going the 8 or ultimately because I wanted to stop the devs in the cities early because that was going to be a challenge for me. I thought, but the reason I didn't block the 5 was, well, I didn't want to upset a player, which I've done in the past many times. But then I also found he was probably going to get the spot anyways, right? So it was probably on the whole a useless block. But these are the things I'm thinking about, right? I'm looking at the different blocks. I'm looking at what are my win conditions, which is probably taking road in this game, and considering how do I move the board that's going to be in a way that's in my favor.
Yeah. And if he is intending on trading for wheat, if Drew's intending on trading for wheat here, putting the robber on a spot that does not impact red is possibly a very good idea. He's probably not going to get many trades early on from black because he is in a race for that wheat port.
Yep.
But when he was saying, I am maybe going to be low on wheat here, that's an added benefit from the 8. I would say most people would probably consider the 8 and the 5 in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And other things to discourage the 5, which Hubsy Wub said, I don't love the 5 wheat, and I would agree with that. There were some, aspects of it that make it not a very good block that Drew already mentioned, but also it doesn't actually harm black very much because he also has the 9 wheat.
Yeah.
Um, and because, as was mentioned before as well, the 5 just rolled, and so red already has a wheat in his hand. So it's not going to be stopping a dev from coming out probably, unless you're also thinking, well, I'll steal it, in which case, you're talking pretty chancy odds there. So
But just know there are many different. I mean, I think a lot of people just snap on 8 or, but just keep in mind there are many different elements to blocks and when you should do it and why.
yeah.
Okay.
And Crane said blocking the 8 limits people's ability to spend the wheat so that you can more easily get wheat traits, which is very true.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like I said, I went with the 8 or because of all the reasons everyone discussed, and it's also a fantastic block. But there are merit to other places that you need to consider in the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit on blocking. Go back on some of the slides, look at some of the nuances there. They are pretty detailed, and we're trying to get too wordy on some of these things, but hopefully the point gets across there. All right, so the next one, and this is actually what I'm super excited about. And this is, I mean, anyone that's played me for, let's say, half a dozen to a dozen games knows I do this all the time, which is placement negotiations. And this is, I think, one of the going to be the big takeaways for people that are on this lesson today, which is no matter which position you are in, there is an opportunity for you to make placement negotiations. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're in third placement. Well, what you can do is you can always go to fourth placement because you go one after another and say, hey, I'm curious, what do you want? Because maybe we can work something out to where we both get something we like and want. Right? So maybe I'll take this settlement knowing that you want this and that, leaving me, whatever's open that I want. And there's actually a lot of fun deals that you can make. There's a lot of insight and intelligence you can gather from just asking the person next to you, hey, what would make sense here? What would you be happy with? This is extremely an effective approach when you're in third or fourth, but you can also do it as first and second. But usually what happens is you do it on the way back, right? So first and second will take, their 695, their 694. Third and fourth will have their conversation. And on the way back, first and second could have a conversation to, hey, what makes the most sense with what's left? So I'm curious, Lenore, do you do these kind of strategies, or is this something you're familiar with?
So I fully recognize the extreme strength of these kinds of strategies, and I will always engage in them if somebody else starts them. I guess for whatever reason, I just don't really like starting them myself. Definitely a preference thing. It's not because I don't think they're strong. They're really strong. It's just not. It's just never really been something that I did. Not for any reason. Just I just don't do it.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, Here's the way I look at it. No matter what happens, I can't lose by asking. Because let's just say, hey, I'm going to do my own thing. The very least, they just say no and we move on and play the game as we were going to play it. And there are a lot of cases where they might tell me something that might give me some ideas of what they want, what are their tendencies, especially if I don't know the player, right? If I'm playing a tournament. So I love having these conversations because the positives are almost there's no downside to asking this question.
Yeah, and
Placements.
Hubsy said, asking table mates what they're thinking about is super underrated, and I definitely do agree with that. Um, I do ask people what they're thinking about a lot of the time. Although sometimes for me, it's just for the purpose of making communication. But yes, definitely, I like to add, add conversation to a silent chat room. But like, definitely do this as a strategy because it is very effective.
Yes, 100%. And the deals that I've made where we've traded plows, we've got, setups that were even better if we just stayed quiet. I mean, I believe this has been a response for many wins uh, in the long term for me. So cool. Take that, run with it, give it a try. We're gonna have some things at the end about this as well. Now, this is the fun one. Placement traps. And Wubsy, we've got or Hubsy, excuse me, we've got your game that we reviewed here. There is, in my opinion, there are some key traps or some themes that consistently happen in games, from my experience, that you need to be aware of. And the first one I put here is the most obvious one, which is the road in hand, right? When you pick a settlement, you place towards a port, but the adjacent setup has a road in hand where someone starts with a road and plows you, right? That's a very common strategy. We've seen that before, but there's some ones that aren't as common. that I think we need to talk about and show some examples. And we're going to break down a game that has essentially almost every single placement trap in one game, which I thought was very interesting. No, I like Devil or Wheat. All right,
Yeah,
we'll talk about why that specific setup bugs me personally. This is a preference thing, but
both of us actually, both of us.
okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's good. We're on the same page.
yeah.
Typically, you've got to be careful, especially as first or second, when you pick two resource setups or two resource placements, right? Because a lot of times that's starting with inflexibility. Um, and the reason why the double ore and wheat setup tends to bug me is because a lot of times you're playing ore wheat sheep, you tend to get a less effective or efficient OWS on the way back. And I'll show you where this comes into to play here in a second. The next one is placing with inflexible ports, right? You get a nice spot, but the ports suck, or you can't get to the ports. That's a big problem. Building to only one settle spot, and there's an example in the game we're about to show where that's a problem as well. Usually, if you can build to multiple settle spots, the flexibility tends to play out better for you in the long run. And there are situations where you should go for the road settle only. We'll talk about that. And then knowing about OP setups, knowing that sometimes that 695 OWS, it is strong, but that could also backfire where you might get overblocked. And all of a sudden you're competing on devs and the 693 is beating you on army and you lose the game. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
And
And
of
or
course, that's not to say that a 695 or wheat sheep is a bad spot. Every single person in this chat knows that it's good, but it is something you need to take into account. You need to be aware of that fact and equipped to deal with it if you're going to take a spot like that. You need to be equipped to deal with all the attention that you're going to take.
and it, like Ebok said, especially if you hype up somebody's placement and all of a sudden you're getting solo blocked on the first
Yeah.
seven. And again, these are just because it's a trap doesn't mean you're going to lose the game, but you just have to be aware that some of these things do happen.
He
All right.
says, Train says 695 or wheat sheep is not a trap. I refuse.
Hey, and look, this also depends on. I would say this also depends on who you're playing, right? If you're playing extremely strong, aware, and communicative players, then yeah, it might be really tough to get away with. But if you're playing with newer or inexperienced players, the 695 might just absolutely slay.
Yeah. Well, and especially, when you have a spot like the 695, you're sometimes fairly dependent on the spot that comes back around, especially if the rest of the board is strong. Like, let's say there's an 8-5-10 that somebody else gets to get, and you have solid competition. But let's say it's also a textbook 11 block, 11, a textbook locked 11 board. And by that, I mean one of those boards where everything places out so that the 11 in the middle is nobody is able to place on it, and you have two starting coastal settlements forced. That will happen sometimes, and when there's a 659 on that, you can find yourself into pretty deep trouble because you become so one-dimensional, especially if somebody else was able to put together a stronger, more flexible setup than you.
That's true. That's true. Hubs, I'm sorry, man. There's so many good examples. I went back to this game, and I felt like because we went through this live on your channel, you wouldn't mind me using this. And by the way, this is Hubsy Wubs. Please follow him on Twitch as well. Fantastic personality in the streaming space, and also doing a lot of great stuff for the community as well. And we reviewed this board, this game, and there's a lot of nuances. So I want to talk. The first placement, and I think someone pointed out the 6-10-5. I agree, or sorry, the 6-10-9. I like that as well. Let's see here. What is
Yeah,
Crane?
Longhorn said the 6-9-10, but Crane said the first question is, does the 8-10 get taken if you go 5-6-10? And yeah, this is where you definitely want to place out the board and try to ask yourself, is that going to get taken?
Kelly's saying. So the 6-5-10 locks the board. That is true. There's a lot of locking elements to that placement. So here's what happened. Let's just kind of go through this. First placement went 6-5-10. And I was talking on stream with Hubsy about this. This is a very, very dangerous strat because first of all, you're banking everything on a one road settle, right? Getting on the 8-10. Versus, like, say if you go 6-10-9, You have the road settle on the wood port, which actually makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of wood here, and you also have the road settle on the ore port. And given the fact there's a lot of wheat and sheep in the middle, you're probably going to get a really nice pairing spot in first. So this is a very risky. This is what I would call kind of the first trap of the board, which is you're setting yourself up for only one road settle on an 8-10, and there might be a chance you might lose that. You got to keep me updated here, Honor, if things come in. All right, so that's the first trap. All right, now farmer's favorite. Second comes in, devil or sheep. Where's this ore man going? He's going to the brickport. So here's the second trap, right? Picking an inflexible setup. Really, and we said this on stream with Hubsy, it was actually probably better that white just points up, because getting to the 3-1 will do a lot more for their flexibility and their production. Now, they could play off potentially the 6 brick and go off the brick port, but if you see how the board's about to place, there is definitely some consequences going without wheat and not playing or wheat sheep here.
And farmers said, the first spot was a trap because someone might just settle on the port or plow. Yes, that is definitely a big trap. The other issue that Drew mentioned is that even if you don't get plowed, you will only have the one road settle as opposed to having two. And it's interesting that then it's not a trap from the 5-9-10 to point towards the 2 hex port spot. And the main reason for that is because it's not going to be hotly contested, and the port is so much better. That having the one settlement spot is with the good port is a significant improvement over having 2 settlement spots with basically nothing usable.
Exactly. Okay, so devil or sheep, again, it's an inflexibility play, and it would make sense if this was the most dominant ore on the board, where you could probably have an advantage or wheat sheep. But if we look, the next placement goes, which is the 8-3-4, right? So now this is Rudix. He's setting himself up for a really good or wheat sheep setup. He's got the flexibility of a sheep port, where there's tons of sheep on the board. He's got a 3-1 over here. So I think white's going to have some challenges when you start to see how this board places. Now, we have Hubsy here, 4th position. Should we give everyone a quick moment to figure out what they want to do here in 4th? Come up with a game plan?
Yeah, everybody think that's a good idea.
We'll give you like 30, 40 seconds or something. I don't want to, like... This is actually a really fun exercise, so if you want to...
Longhorn says multiple ideas. That's good.
That's what
File them in.
6, 9, 10 if you don't get Woodport. 11.
What's up?
What's up? We are live. Who is this? Squash.
Oh, hey Squash. Hey Squash.
Hey, we are actually live on Twitch. So if you want to actually tune in there and you have questions based on what we're talking about, feel free, man. We're actually reviewing a board. So.
Wait, you said you wanted me to play?
Oh yeah, I'll ping you about that. I'll message you about that.
Okay, 8-3-4, 9-4, 11. 8-3-4, 9-4, 11. Okay, I like it. Maybe you 8-3-4 left. Okay, so you looks like you're going 8-10. 8-3-4, 8-3-5. Okay, and that was actually discussed as well. Yep. Then 8-3-4 to 8-10. Nora, what would you do here real quick? Because Nora has not seen this yet. So maybe if you want to make a quick assessment, and then we'll.
I think it's a difficult board. I don't. But I think I would probably try to incorporate the 8-5-3 here because I'm worried about. Because I think it's fairly easy to incorporate into a setup at the bottom. So I'm thinking kind of an 8-5-3, 8-3-4 sort of play. You could use the free roads to move to the 8-10, but you also have a wheat port down there. And you could potentially use a free road to quickly road settle onto the other 8-10 as well to get yourself some ore. I think there's a lot of good I think there's a lot of good options with a setup like that.
Yeah. Okay, and then and Griff saying 6, 9, 12, 8, 8, 5, 3. And by the way, this is what I love. I love how like we have literally 4 or 5 variations, different ideas. And again, if you guys go back to the beginning episodes, we kind of stated there's no one way to do things. There's multiple things. There's personality. There's play style that matter here. Um, and
Hey, raid.
oh, we got a raid.
Yeah, David George, give us the raid.
What
Hello.
up? What up, goat?
Hello, everyone. We're analyzing boards right now. We're talking about critical strategies in the opening section of the game, and then after this is done, we're going to be doing some live games.
Some playthroughs.
And yeah, and we're taking questions as well. Right now, we're talking about 4th placement on this board.
Well, everyone, welcome. Yeah, we actually in the final opening. So it's a masterclass, a couple weeks of Catan lessons. This is the final episode of the opening. So we have multiple episodes that have already occurred. You can watch them on the Twitch as well. But we're just kind of looking for some quick setups. Drew, you clear David. I don't know what that means, but David's a beast, man. All right, so I think for the sake, we'll just keep moving here. I think there was a lot of ideas around the 385, which makes sense, the 384, and then the 6912, and then obviously kind of looking at this 9411 area. I think intuitively, people who are seeing those spots, they're in the right ballpark, and I think you can make a lot of those work. The biggest thing I would keep in mind, this goes back to the first masterclass. Again, this is from Dandy Drew's perspective, is what are you playing for, right? If that's going to be your setup. The problem with the 835 and the 834 for me personally is the road aspect of it, because you're probably not going to win on devs, right? You don't have the starting ore. I mean, unless you can really hit production and hit the port quickly, and your road network's a little bit disconnected. So that's one of my drawbacks of having the distance. I love being able to connect and have space. What Hubsy did here, and we'll get into some other ideas here as well, and we talked a lot about this thought process, and I really liked what he was saying, was he wanted to go 8, 3, 10, 2, 9, 4 to 5, 2. And the whole idea is... What's up?
That's what I said to do in the chat.
Oh, man. Okay. So, Hubsy, you're not alone, man. And there are some... And his whole thing was, okay, I'm going to play for development cards. I'm going to get an OWS set up. And that's what I'm going to go. My only thing to the Hubs here was that he's got a lot of competition on devs, right? Because we know Wyatt is more or less ready to play devs. Rudix is probably going to be playing devs as well. And now you're going to be the third person in with questionably maybe the weaker or slower OWS setup. So I didn't really like that on the surface. And that's kind of the way we look at it. But I want to point out some things real quick. And Honor, you're going to have to kind of help me with the chat here, so I'm keeping up with everything.
Yeah.
And I will show you my pick at the end. But at the beginning, we talked about the butterfly effect, right? Where when you pick certain things or you do certain things, it's going to have dominoes that come down the road from that. And so after Hubs picks the 294, the 1038, there's a force and sequence here. It essentially sets up the entire board based on his placements. And it's almost forced, absolutely forced. And let's take a look. The first forcing placement is 853 here by Rudix. This makes a lot of sense where he gets great production. He gets to play off the 2 ports. He gets the side-by-side. But the reason this is more forced is that he doesn't want to give the 385 to White.
Yeah.
Because giving double sheep, double wheat, double ore is just way too strong. So in a sense, Rudix has to take that spot away from White. So now White has to make a decision. Where am I going to go as White? The problem is if he tries to play Ori sheep off of the 4-11-5, he's got way too much sheep in his hand. He doesn't have the port. Right now he's in a position where he's way too inflexible because he started with this double ore and sheep spot. So what's forced? He has to take the 8-10. This makes a lot more sense with his ratios, right? So now his wheat's a little bit more balanced with his ore and his sheep. And then you can use that extra wood and potentially the 9-10 to give him a more viable OWS game. So now there's space in the board, and that forces Black to take the 4-5-11. Now I would argue that they probably should have pointed left, right? Because the 9-11-3 just probably makes a little more sense in stopping any kind of road shenanigans. But I want you guys to see how your placements and your decisions have cascading effects to how the board plays. And all that was forced in my eyes. And I think they did a good job finding kind of the best responses there. Now, here's the final result. Ultimately, Rudix played, I think, very principally. His position made a lot of sense. He had great production, great ports, and that secured him the debut. Where essentially, I mean, even the guy that went double or sheep, he didn't even get army. He lost army to black, which is actually pretty impressive here. So, again, this just kind of goes back to know what you're playing for. Oh, we can't see the placements. Only 3 placements. What's up?
What? I didn't see. I missed what she's talking about.
I think we didn't see the last placement.
Oh, my bad.
So you couldn't see Hubs? Yeah, Hubs is red.
Hubs is red here. Yeah, so he took in 4th position, he took the 10-3-8, 2-4-9. The whole idea was this set up a cascading effect of forced placements to make sure the board was balanced a certain way.
Armor, you don't see reds? Are you disconnected from the stream? Because I see it right now. Is everybody else seeing it?
I can see it, question mark?
I see all the placements.
Okay,
Yeah, I think. Yeah, refresh, Farmer.
It's not me this time, Farmer.
Watch another ad.
I don't run ads. I mean, if they happen.
Yeah, no, I know. They happen sometimes.
Yeah.
She was talking about watching an ad trying to load in earlier.
Ultimately, to me, when I look at this position, it made a lot of sense why Rudix won this game. Not to say, Hubs or anyone necessarily did anything wrong. I do think there were some mistakes. But I think from a principled standpoint, if I had to look at this board and say who has the best shot, I think I would have said Rudix. Just given the production, the overwhelming strength of that Orweat sheet versus Whites and the flexibility, it made a lot more sense to why they would win this game. And of course, Black, they got risky. They lost the 8-10. That was a big problem. And then Hubsy had kind of a production challenge in the beginning. He did get some lucky rolls, though, which was nice. How did Black get army? Essentially, if I recall, Black just 4-for-1'd as much as they could to buy devs.
Thought he had a win condition, I guess.
Yeah, which is, they figured it out. They figured it out. Here's an idea that I had for this board. And again, this is stylistic, but I want you to start thinking about what am I playing for? How can I make this make sense? I really love this idea of the 10-3-8 to the brick port and the 6-9-12. Again, this is fodder for the brick port. You get the best wood. You have the ability to go 11-6 down to the 3-4, play off a road. This was kind of what I thought was probably the more optimal decision, leaving some potential spots for White to maybe where they could play Orweat sheep a little bit more effectively and not go to the 8-10. All right, let's see here. What's that? What am I doing with my hands in this frame? Think you're about to go under the armpits into like thinking mode. I thought White going 8-10 was a mistake. I actually think the 8-10 makes a lot of sense in that, the way the board placed out, it made sense there.
And it's also from a defensive perspective, right? Because if you don't take it, you risk ending up with a very strong purple here. No, sorry, very strong black, who's gonna have board expansion available to themselves and have the good resource balance and the port. So
exactly. And again, I think a lot of the things I point out here were about opening traps. Remember, placement traps. So big thing is, more often than not, it's better that you take a 3 hex and point to the coast in the sense of getting 2 placements. The 6-10-9 was much, much better for Black, given the opportunities in the middle of the board. I feel like the 5-10-9 was just way too inflexible. I mean, even the 3-6-3-4 is better than the 5-10-9, in my opinion, given the ports. And then for Hubsy, probably better for him to pick a road less traveled on, which would probably be playing off a road and playing off of a road network that works for his position. Food for thought. If anyone has ideas, please go back. I'd love to hear their thoughts on the board and some of the options here. But there's a lot of interesting elements here. Honor, any final words before we move on? And we're actually getting close to wrapping this up, and we can get into the game here in a minute.
No, keep going. Keep going.
Cool. Okay. Again, any questions, raise your hand, let us know. Nora's watching the chat. The next thing I want to talk about is trading. To me, this is, I'd like to think I've played more online tournaments than anybody in the last year and a half. Like, I'm probably the most seasoned online tournament player at this point. And this is probably one of the most underappreciated things that I've seen in all the games I've played, which is trading in the opening, getting aggressive. In my opinion, you need to get into the mindset that every single turn there is a trading opportunity. Now, does that mean you'll get a trade every turn? Certainly not. But if you have the mindset that, hey, what are the potential opportunities? What are the trades that I can make? What are people missing that maybe I can provide them with? You'll think more holistically about strategy that way. And for people that know me, I'm actually a very aggressive trader. I'm not afraid to do 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s, especially when I'm getting critical settles, cities, or even development cards in some cases. So one of my things I would like to push for everyone here is to get more aggressive with your trading. Get what you need early on so that you can do what you need in the middle game and not have to worry about falling behind. Another tactical thing you can do, and this people ask me, why do I have an alt called frame control? Well, this is one thing I like to do a lot, is framing things in a favorable way to the other player. So if I'm going to make, let's say, a wood trade, and I know that wood gives the other player settlement, I want them to start thinking about why this trade is favorable to them and not necessarily why I want the wheat for my city or for my development card. So a lot of times when I'm making trades, I'll say something like, hey, Honora, this wood actually gives you the settle as well, right? And all of a sudden, they're starting to think about the value from their perspective and not necessarily what they're giving me as much. So there are many different ways that you can frame trades that make it more favorable for both opponents, both sides. I'm seeing the word stingy trader. I'm assuming we're talking about Kelly. Is that?
He's saying Griffin. Griffin is a stingy trader.
I know Kelly's self-proclaimed stingy, so I can say that with confidence. I would also say when it comes to trading, really focus on getting your ports. I will do a lot to make sure that I secure my ports in the early stages. And this is also something I see a lot when you're trading for development cards. It's almost silly if you trade someone a knight and they use the knight to block you. Right? So anytime I'm going to make a trade that's going to give somebody a development card, I always say, hey, if you pull a knight, can you not block me with it? Because what's the point of giving you a knight to block me? And again, this is going back to this framing tactic, where if you can frame things in a way that makes sense and are favorable, it's going to help you get more compounding interest on the board. So anytime I trade a development card, I'm saying, the only way I'm going to make this trade is if you don't block me with that knight you're about to pull. Because otherwise, why would I want to get blocked? All right. Anything that's coming out from trading?
Hubsy. Hubsy's got a split, but we'll see you.
Awesome.
Next time.
Thanks, Hubsy. I think there's one more slide with you in here, but we appreciate your presence. The opposite of it is Aja, though. The average, and some players like to spam trades. Some people are very aggressive trading where they'll feed somebody purposely. So there's a lot of interesting strategies you can use with trading.
Yeah, Nebox says best players can package trades well and create trap trades for opponents. Yeah, that's true.
Yep. We're gonna get a lot more into trading in the middle game because this is more about opening. But get into the mindset that, remember, a trade is also favorable for the other player too. So lots of people will kind of push you back when you're making trades. Remember, sometimes you're giving them what they need as well, and it's important to bring that up into the conversation. All right, the last 2 points we want to talk about is expansion and ports. We don't have to talk about this one quite as much, But as mentioned from the first masterclass episodes, getting your production up, getting your expansion is really one of your main objectives in the opening to middle game. And there's usually kind of a balance of, do I take open space, right? So if there's a 3-hex spot, or do I go for ports? Honora, I'd love to hear your take on kind of your thought process of how do you prioritize when there are open hexes in the middle board versus going for an early port?
Um, One thing that I learned really early on from the man, the myth, the legend, Ollie himself,
Ooh.
which actually he hasn't been around these last couple months, so maybe some of you don't even know who it is, but that'd be Motu Ollie is his name. Anyway, so he was probably one of the best players online at the time, and he told me um, that if he sees a 3-hex spot, even if it's a 10-3-11, then he takes it over every single port spot. He will prioritize it, and I didn't go quite that crazy, but he's a strong enough player that it made an impression on me. And so what I do is, if the port is not critically important, like if I'm not on 15 points of wood and I need the wood port, if it's not a situation like that, or a race for a 3-to-1 port, something like that, if it's not the linchpin of my game, then I will prioritize the 3-hex spot first. That was something that I kind of borrowed from Ollie because he puts so much emphasis on it.
Yeah.
And it really does. It definitely grabs a lot of board space from a road building perspective. It's really valuable. The person who controls the center of the board usually has a very strong advantage in late game road competitions.
Mhm.
And it diversifies your numbers a lot better than any other spot will.
Yep.
And it limits other players as well. Because if you don't take it, sometimes you're the only person who's going to get your port. Nobody else is ever going to get it. Even if you never take it for the entire game, nobody will ever actually go there. But if you don't take a spot, somebody else is going to take it. So 3-hex is very is very valuable.
Now, I wanted to point this out. I think Ebox saying 3-hex placements versus port placements. We're actually not talking about that here. This is more about where you're going to road settle to, right? Where's your next settle spot going to be? There is a conversation about when to place on a port versus not. But ultimately, Honor, I think we feel the same way about this, where it's like, if I know, for instance, my port's not in danger of being taken, or and I have enough time to go get the middle spots, I will. So usually when you see open 3-hex spots, it's usually a better thing to prioritize getting those, because it's more production, it's more space, and it's also things that your opponents can't get as well. So space, expansion, very important here.
In fact, actually, there was a game that I just spectated yesterday.
Okay.
That Rayman was playing in, one of the other players of all time, and um and he was in a position where somebody had left open a 3-hex spot that he had as a road settle. His port was critically important to him, and so he busted his tail end off getting a trade
Mhm.
so that he could win the race to his port because it was being raced for. And he put down his road,
Mhm.
and then he scrapped settling on the port to turn around and do another road settle onto the 3-hex spot. So like he secured his port with his road,
Yeah.
which you may call, from a resource, it's a wasted road, right? You turned your road settle into a road settle, right? But it was like 3-hex spots are important enough as expansion opportunities that's the kind of approach that the really strong players take towards it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get everything, then that's obviously the most ideal situation. I actually have here an example. This was from the finals of last week's weekend tournament. I was again GM Pied Piper. People know that's me. And I made a deal here with Red where this 10-3-11 was kind of, we were both staring at it. Looks like a great spot for me as the road player. This was part of my whole plan, was to connect here as blue. And I made a deal to say, hey, I'm going to help you get the ore port and also help you fight devs, because that's probably your main way to win this game. and they left the 10-3-11, and that gave me the opportunity to go to 6-2 first versus having to fight. So there are a lot of times where if you do have considerations about spots in the middle, have conversations, right? Make deals, make situations favorable to you and the other people on the board, and that's how you're going to get a lot more out of the board and what you need to do. And ultimately, what happened there was I ended up getting everything I wanted. Right, I got the 3-1 port. I did a very simple 4 cities road play, and that won me the game. What did you give Red to get that insane deal? Seems like a bad deal for Red.
Yeah, probably.
Probably. Well, but
in
that's
full honesty, yeah, that's probably a pretty bad deal for him.
yeah, and I'm not even.
But also, you don't have like if they're willing to give you a good deal, you don't have to make it fair. Like you try things even if you think they won't accept it. You try things on the off chance that they will accept it. You know.
Well, I think too what made this more interesting for Red is that the Orport made a lot more sense for them anyways. Right? Like they would have to put a lot of resources in 10-3-11, and Boop was actually doing a really good job expanding quickly. So I think Red was getting a little concerned that if they don't go for the Orport first, they're going to lose it. So I had a lot of things in my favor, but I think just having that conversation, say, hey, I'm going to help you. And at this time, too, Black was actually pacing very hard on the board, so it kind of opened lines of communication for me. Black has the best road resources and can't be a contender for road.
Black's lacking in the wood department, but
yeah, well, of course you can always trade with Roe here, right? Who has a ton of wood playing side by side. But once I got this 6-2 and the 10-3-11, it was almost impossible to stop my road game because if all else fails, I can just go around the 10, right, and connect that way. But these are things I'm conscious about when I'm thinking about the dynamic of the board and the fact that I need certain spots here. All right, so I think we've got one more principle here. So expansion, remember 3 hexes are priority, but if you can make deals to hold them, even better to get your ports. All right, this one is just going to be a quick point out to everyone. Pacing. Probably the most underappreciated and honestly one of the most difficult aspects of Catan. At least from my perspective, how do you pace? You know, when you're playing different kinds of players, what kind of mindsets do you need when you're pacing? How hard can I pace against a certain board or a certain group of people? This is definitely an experiential thing. And what we mean by pacing, for those who don't know, is how do you build in a way that doesn't put you too far in front or too far behind the rest of the board? Because if you go too far in front, you're getting more blocks, you're getting less deals. Now, if you do fall behind, you might get some more deals, but you are behind. So there's an art of how do you stay with the board and how do you communicate that.
Pacing is the aspect of the game that I find the most difficulty with having a good touch, like having playing it with finesse. Like Crane says right now, he says I'm not making a city in most situations when I can. What he means, like, if you have a city in hand, it's like I'm gonna make it, and I definitely do that as well. I'm pretty my pacing is more so from a table talk perspective. I really heavily pace when I do and don't table talk aggressively, and as opposed to the actions that I take in the game. I will sometimes encourage people to block my spots, or if I feel like I'm pacing too quickly, in an attempt to build rapport, so that I can turn that around later in the game and have some good credibility when I tell people to block somebody else. So my pacing is more in that perspective. I really struggle with the pacing from a game actions perspective, because just like Crane says, see city in hand, monkey see monkey do. It's like, oh, see city build city, Ebox says sometimes you just got a city. It depends. Oh, of course, yes, of course, yeah.
And see this. Yeah. This is what I found psychologically is the players who city first tend to get the most heat. And this is why I love playing the road game, because a lot of times you're focused on getting your expansion while the OWS players are getting their cities. And it kind of allows you this little buffer of time to kind of build unnoticed. But
Back in the day when I started playing, I didn't feel the same way, but I definitely feel the same way now. Like I always felt like people who were getting a 3 hex expansion spot, like they were getting hit really, really hard,
yeah,
and 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 so I often would open city. I would plan a lot of my games to open city, and that worked really well, particularly in the second season of Catan Community because I
nice.
did manage to win that. Um, but these days, I find that I get more flack than when I open, with a city for my third point than with basically any other strategy. So the meta has shifted a little bit, I guess. People block cities a lot now,
For
more than
sure.
they used to.
And I think that's kind of the nature of people really respect OWS, maybe a little bit too much. But
Mhm.
there's just a bigger conversation here to know who you're playing against. And I'll just summarize this real quick. I mean, usually the stronger the opponents, the more you'll need a pace with the board. And vice versa, right? If you're playing with newer or weaker opponents, you can take more risk and you can jump ahead because their communication coordination is going to be a lot less in terms of taking that player that's jumping far ahead. So there's a lot of things that we're going to be talking about pacing as we're playing through the playthroughs and continuing the lessons. But I wanted to throw some general concepts here, and you guys can read that and kind of go through it as well. All right. Lastly, and then we're going to start going through board reviews, and then we're going to play some games. Every move matters. And this kind of goes back to this idea about the butterfly effect, right? The little things you do at the beginning of the game or in let's say, a particular moment could have long-term effects to what happens. An example here, and Hubsy and I reviewed this, is he dropped 2 roads to the 6-2 this way. And I immediately, as a road player, something didn't feel right about this. Because I saw this future where he was going to have to potentially try to take road going down the middle, 6 to the 9-3-11. But then what happens to his road network, right? If you drop 2 roads this way, you get this weird fork shape. And if he wants to take road, then he has to wrap all the way around the 2. Versus, let's say, to get to the 6-2, he went on the coast. So drop, and then he built his roads this way. He's actually got a built-in linear road network where he doesn't have to worry about dropping these extra 2 roads. And this decision actually, in my opinion, cost him the game because he had to spend a ton of extra resources to take road around the 2 versus if he just kept on going, building progressively. You see that, Anora?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was distracted by something else that's happening.
No worries. So this is ultimately what happened is in a moment of the board having to take road here, this is what he ended up doing. He had to drop 2 roads and building
Oh yeah.
the Catan crop circle. Versus, again, if he went on the coast, he could have progressively built to the 9-3-11, connected, and built also a settlement here. And this one little decision to build 2 roads from the other side cost him. I think you got the 6 or if you just play verdict on the sheet port. Yeah, you can always go for the 6 or that way. Could be a big investment, and I don't think he had a lot of wood materials on a 2 wood. I think that was one of his limiting factors. So just know, if you ever have any questions about the moves you're making, spend an extra moment, right? Think a little bit critically about why something could be good or not be good. It's good to think about the cons of every move as you're improving. All right, so takeaways. I am not going to get rid of this part here, which is to make an opening plan. Any player that wants to get better, you need to spend a little bit of time on the front end of your position to figure out, hey, what are the things I need to do to make this position successful, right? So as I usually say, find your first 7 to 8 points and use your time. I think a lot of people don't appreciate when you get time. They don't use it thoughtfully or enough. So always going with some kind of opening plan and kind of a game plan that's going to help you. Next, use the placement negotiation technique. We talked about that where depending if you're first or second or third or fourth, having that conversation with the other person to see, hey, can you work out deals or a placement strategy that benefits you both? Very helpful. And then I want to see more people trading, right? At least look to offer some kind of trade deal at least every other turn you have. You could probably find a way to do it every turn. You don't have to be ultra aggressive in that way. But I think every other turn where you're looking for opportunities, you're looking for ways to help the board help you, you're going to to squeeze a lot more opportunity out of it than if you just passively played your game.
Sometimes you really do have games where you have the opportunity to make good trades basically every single turn. But also, even if you're in a game where you don't, practicing doing this, if you're trying to get a good handle on, when you can make good trades, tracking cards, practicing doing this, getting a good understanding of how the other players feel on the board will really help you not to miss situations when you have the opportunity to make a critical trade that's going to dramatically improve your game.
Yep, love it.
Kind of
Alright.
like it's like tracking cars where you track like really really perfectly while you're practicing for it, and then when you play an actual game, there are too many things to think about, and so you can't track perfectly. But because you've been practicing tracking perfectly, you track pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, with tracking, you don't have to know every single card. I would say even the best players that I know, like, they have a general idea. And I feel like that will get you 80 to 90% of the way there in most cases, especially when it comes to tracking. But I'm telling you, if you can find ways to get 2 or 3 more trade deals in your games, it will dramatically improve your results, especially the momentum that you could be building in the opening stages. All right, Enora. So that's kind of the lesson. I think we went through some nice principles. I don't think necessarily we have the answers here, if that makes sense. Like, every situation is going to be different, but I would love for people to take some of these concepts and start thinking a little bit more critically about their positions, their decision making. And if you can just take one little tidbit and improve your game next time you play, then all of this makes sense. So hopefully you've brought some things to light to consider there as you're improving.
Hey, little chip eater, welcome.
Hey, what's going on? All right. So now we're going to do some boards of the week. These were boards that were submitted to us from various players in the community. And the first one, and by the way, we spent actually quite a bit of time, Nora and I, looking at these boards, reviewing them. So we've done a lot of the heavy lifting.
We spend probably too much time reviewing these boards, but yeah.
the love of the game.
Yeah.
All right, so this one was actually submitted by Ritter. Nora, I'm going to let you kick this one off here in terms of, hopefully you remember, I have the notes here, but if you want to kind of maybe just stay at the board and we can kind of move on real quick here. Because we had 2 different ideas here, I think.
Yeah, so Ritter wanted to know what to do on 4th here, I believe, right?
Yeah, so 4th was Jimbo. So he put the 692 and then
4th is red here, and he took the 692. This one is really tough. It's particularly from a resource rarity perspective. So like when you're looking at this and you want to analyze this board, obviously like we had gone over in the earlier masterclass episodes, we talked about looking at the supply and demand of resources. Ore is pretty low. There's only 1/8. It's in the corner. Most likely, only one person is going to be on that ore until maybe late in the game when somebody manages to expand there. The brick is also clumped into the corners. The wheat is clumped as well. This is a really, really tough board here for 4th because all of those good rare resource spots have been taken. And you're just kind of stuck with a bunch of sheep. And Crane says 659 plus sheep port is all I see. And yes, that's like the only thing that appears at first glance. And you're thinking like, oh well, maybe we can make this stronger by going 659 with the 1092, and then we can build to the 6-2, get a good expansion spot. But that's really risky because if I remember correctly, black placed first, right? And if it gets to black's turn and nothing's left but the 6-2, you better bet your britches he's gonna take the 6-2 because that is a spot that's gonna fix his the resource imbalance of his hand. Now it's not the best spot in the world, but it's a serious risk if you try to play full sheep port with a 10-9-2, and so you would be stuck with really really awkward resources. Ever go 6-9-12, and yes, this is what we determined would be pretty solid, is because getting that starting brick is a lot better than having the 5 sheep. And even if you were to place there and not get the free road, which would be nutters, but even if you somehow did that, 1 point of brick is almost certainly more valuable to you on this board than 4 points of sheep, because you already have like 9 points of sheep in most situations on this board.
Yeah.
And then why don't you lead off with what your I believe you had a side by side idea
Variation.
here, Drew.
Yeah, so there was two things. I think we agreed the 695 is just it's such a strong production spot to give to anybody else on this board, right? So I saw this
Yeah.
potential idea of 695 point left, and then you get the 10 5, and you get the wheat port, which the wheat port doesn't matter as much. It's more just about a subtle spot in production. Then you could also play off of the 6 3 11 here and try to get some kind of plow action here. Because the way we looked at it was that blue was not necessarily going to have a road in their hand, and there's a lot of potential deals and rolls where you could find a way to manufacture a brick. So that is one variation where
It looks like you will lose this because you're thinking he's gonna get wood on his spot, like on his placement, right? And then he's
Mhm.
got the 4, and you don't make any brick, but you're doubled up on the 6. So you either need the 5 to roll a handful of times, and then you can trade with purple for a brick, and that's before the 4 rolls, or you just need the 6 to roll twice, and you 4 to 1 because you're gonna get 2 wood on the 6s with that setup. You already
Yeah.
had a wood to start with, so just need 2 6 for the 4 to 1 for a brick. You win the race, and if you get that 411, that is definitely a very strong setup.
Yeah. And then you're playing off of a road network here. You got tons of production. You've got all 5 resources at this point. I really like
With the
this
three to
idea.
one port, with the 3 to 1 port, which is definitely the best port for you in this scenario.
100%. And then I think if you want to go with the safer option, you could do a similar idea with the side by side, but you're doing 6 3 11, and then instead of going on the 5, you're just going to take the road straight up and get the plow in hand. And I think this is probably the safer bet. And you can still build to the 9 5, which is great production. The 411, you have the road connect here. That's what I think I would do here, but it's definitely tough. The sheep port play is definitely viable. I just don't like the prospects of the lack of the road network, and then you're more or less praying for some kind of build to 10 strategy. I just don't see it's quite as viable on this board. So I think those are all good options. Cool. So that was the first board. I think that's what. So your play just a. I think you mentioned the 10 9 2. Is that correct, Honor? And then you take the road.
Oh
in
yeah,
hand?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
This
So
this was Honor's play
so
here.
another potential play is to pair the 10 9 2 with the 6 9 12, getting the free road,
Oh,
and it'll take a while to place this out properly, and technical difficulties, but um,
we can see
sheep
it.
Crane says he thinks the sheep port play seems losing, and I would probably agree with that. Um,
Yeah,
there's
yeah, I think so.
actually some really good if you place out the board here and you do the setup that was mentioned before. It locks down a lot of space. You
But
can actually do a pretty space conserving setup with it, which is the 10 9 2 with the 6 9 12, getting a free road. Um,
it is low
and
production. That is probably the biggest drawback of that. I think.
it's one less point of wood and one less point of ore. With one more point of wheat. So I think that it's actually worth it, a worthy trade there.
Mhm.
The idea here is that you would have a safe expansion spot onto something like the 5 2 to get yourself access to a strong brick. And if you place out the board, you actually have 3 hex spots open in the middle next to the 10 9 2, and road left from the 10 9 2 is a possibility. Um, you would most likely play for 3 to 1 port off of the 6 9 12 if you had a situation like that. Um, but um, but yeah, so I talked about that one with Drew for a really long time, and in the interest of time, I'm not gonna go as deep with it as I probably should. But I remember that I was very fond of it. I didn't like it as much as the side by side
Mhm.
until I started doing the placing it out and analyzing it that way. Because um, it seems to leave you with a really strong position compared to the other players, because it also makes their setups um, somewhat awkward. Anyways,
Longhorn saying
go
I
ahead.
like the 6 12 11 10 5. I mean, I don't know 6 12 11
The 10-5. Well, he's saying he just wants the all 5 resources, but that's really just so low production.
At that point, I'd rather just take the 956. The 956 and build to the 10-5.
Yeah. Nobody's probably going to place on the 10-5, and you should be able to secure it by going with the high production 659 spot. I mean, the 659 by itself almost has as much production as the two placements.
Yeah.
That you mentioned there.
That's also viable too, even taking that side by side where you're taking the 6, 12, 11 and the 9, 5, 10. Or sorry, the 6, 9, 5.
659.
All
That's
right.
possible.
All right, so let's keep moving here. So this one was submitted to us by Sparrow. He didn't really give us a lot of guidance on this one, if I recall, but I think we kind of, if I recall, wasn't Oreo the first settle here?
Oreo was first settle. Yeah, this was the most interesting thing, was that 854 was taken as first settlement.
Yeah, this is super interesting to me. This kind of falls into one of the same opening traps, right? Which is you're really putting a lot of emphasis on this road settle, this 8-3. And he kind of fell into one of the opening traps where it's like, what happens if the 8-3 goes? What's your game plan there? Which is,
and he was also taking the lack of diversity in the setup. You know, he went with the 2 resource first placement, which left him with pretty weak options on the way back. And this is actually exactly the kind of scenario that I was talking about before, where it's a textbook locked 11 board, where
super
the
locked.
11, everybody places around the 11 in exactly such a way that you could not possibly settle in the middle of the board. And that means that there are forced to be 2 starting settlements that are on the coast. So this is a minimal space setup. And that really, really weakens first placement. So you need to try to look at where the really strong spots are.
But also, it's important to note that it's locked because of Oreo's first settle. Right? This was the dominoes. This was the butterfly effect at play.
Crane says single wood port. That's what Farmer would do. Oh, she actually said so. Yeah. See, I know Farmer. That's what Farmer would do. But,
locking boards with defensive placements. Yeah, it really is. And I think a lot of people, I mean, it is a rare thing to happen, but I do think it's worth having strategies and being prepared for it. I mean, Nora, I think we both agreed the 695 here is pretty damn good, right?
yeah, it's a 695, and there are some pretty strong. We also liked the 694, but because of how difficult it's going to be to get wheat on the way back here, I think 695 is better, just because you will have more flexibility coming back
to the port.
Now, if you can influence the board to in any way leave wheat open, if you could influence 834 to be taken instead of the 810-3, for example, so that the 10-3-11 was open, or if you could influence red to place on the 6-11-12 instead of the 6-3-11, to have a starting, or anything that you could do that would leave any amount of wheat open, 694 immediately becomes a solid first placement. But just as it stands, with how locked the board is turning out from the get-go, 695 is probably the best spot.
And can someone confirm? I think Lundy won this game because this was from the anniversary tournament. As far as I know, he won that tournament. Or did Oreo win this?
I'm pretty sure Oreo won this.
Oreo won it?
Longhorn and Kelly say Lundy won.
I thought so. And to be fair, I don't know where Oreo went, but it makes a lot of sense.
Farmer says he placed 8 desert on the Woodport.
Oh.
He went 8-4.
He went 8. He went on the Woodport or on the 8-4?
8-4.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Honestly, I think I might go Woodport at that point and just build 8-4. But
yeah, I would probably build 8-4 if I was in that situation.
But this, and it makes a lot of sense when you look at everyone's setup and you look at the production Lundy has. You look at the flexibility, right? The expansion, also the road. I'm assuming he took road to win. I mean, I'm just looking at it thinking like that makes a lot of sense to me. I can see why green wins this position. So the lesson here is 695 is great, but also the way he placed pretty much had a cascading effect. You know, again, the butterfly effect of how you place and what happens to the board.
Ani asked, he said, did Oreo go 6-3 to 6-2? And Drew and I analyzed this board for a while, and if I remember correctly, that is the spot that we thought would be best for him if he was in this dire situation, which we thought he shouldn't have been in because he should have picked a different first spot. But we said if we were in this situation, I believe that's what we said we liked the most, was playing 6-3 to 6-2.
Yeah, it's rough.
This is not a good. This is
Yeah,
not a
no
good
matter what, it's rough. I
place
mean,
to find yourself. This
I
is
think
bad.
I think we said you have to deal make the win here as Oreo, and I'd be very curious to know what he ended it with his final score. But I think in principle, the 695, 3 unique resources, high production. You've got ports and space here on the right side of the board. Makes a lot of sense. So interesting perspective.
I viewed this game for a bit when they were playing.
Okay.
Oreo did get to the 8-10 and he did 8-4 to Woodport.
Okay, so
Farmer says he went. Farmer said he went Woodport, expanded to the 8-4, and then expanded to the 8-10 on the right side of the board. Which, I mean, it was massive Woodport, but it wasn't enough to get him the win.
I think the problem with that is probably for him was it might have been a little too slow.
Yeah,
that's what I'm assuming.
It's just slow. All right, let's keep moving.
All right, I agree. All right, this was submitted to us by Agron. All right, so this is another active community member, also streamer. And what Agron did here as red, I think he was 4th. Is that correct? He went 3-4-8, 8-4. So as far as I can tell, he decided to go all in OWS 8-4.
Yeah, that's what he did.
All right. I'll let you talk about this one. Then you and I both agreed on this, by the way, as far as what should happen here.
Yeah.
So this was fun.
So the 6-9-3 was open in this position because green hadn't yet placed. And we liked the most here was, well, first of all, wheat's pretty bad. Because not because it's particularly low producing, it's pretty average, but it's very clumped and it's already fairly locked. And so what we foresaw was that being on the playing like or wheat sheep would be very difficult. This is probably the best or wheat sheep setup that you could piece together from this position, and it just does not feel winning by any stretch of the imagination.
Also, the ports suck. I mean,
ports are just absolutely terrible.
There's no flexibility. It's kind of that situation we had in that one game, right, where you're going double or sheep, and you're going to like a brick port. It's like you don't even have brick.
You could point left here, but you really risk yourself getting plowed by the 6-3-11.
Placement trap, right? Road in hand.
Free road. Yeah, I mean, it's free. You're competing with a free road second placement. I mean, you basically can't win it. Can't use a brick port at all. Sheep port is practically useless because you're never going to have enough sheep to actually port away with the amount of ore and wheat you're going to come in. So what we see here as being very valuable is trying to incorporate this 5-4-11 in the middle of the board here. The idea that you can get a sort of monopoly on the middle of the board, get good road placement, and it pairs very well with the 6-9-2. So what we liked was 6-9-2 point left. You're not in serious threats for anybody to place onto the 6-3, and if they did, would leave open a lot of space in the middle of the board and may even be a net benefit for you, depending on the spot that you would be able to get. And you place second on a 5-4-11. You have those 2 starting bricks. You can point your road left if you want to. If you want to race for that 8-4 there, you would probably win that. Gives you the majority of the wood on the board. Gives you a lot of brick as well, and the starting bricks. And when you place this out, what you see is that green in that position always takes the 8-3-4. I mean,
yep.
It's a very strong spot to pair with the 8-5-10 that he has right now. And then that leaves there's a lot of free roads in the center.
Yeah. I think if you're blue, you want to strike a deal with orange to figure out like where to point your road to each get a settlement spot.
Oh, so both of you is going to get a free road. It's actually not possible
Yeah.
to place in such a way as you block all the free roads,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
4 of them all in a straight line. So it's not possible to block all of them as blue. Both of them are going to get 3 hex spots. There's going to be an open 3 hex spot, which should be the 943, which is right in the middle of the setup that we have here with the 692. And now you may say, okay, well, it's possible that maybe Rayman takes the 10 and 10 9 11 and he wants to race us to this 943. If you think about the statistics, actually slightly advantaged for us to win that race. It doesn't look like it because he has the free road. We have 2 starting bricks with 9 points of wood.
Also, psychologically, does the board really want the 965 player to get even more?
Yeah, of course not. And
Yeah.
all you need is a wheat trade, really, if the 2 doesn't roll, which it probably won't.
And there's
So
plenty of that.
yeah, and there's plenty of wheat, especially in Green's hand, and he's gonna want wood probably. He's also gonna want sheep. You started with a sheep, so if you get if you get an additional sheep roll, you'll if you get 1 sheep roll, you'll have a spare sheep.
Yep.
So this is a really strong position here, especially if you're able to get that 943, which you should be able to get in most situations.
Yep.
Um,
So just to recap, so we're going to take the double wood, double brick setup, and ideally try to get our expansion to build our setup for us, right? 8-4, I think we have a really good shot to get, and I also think the 9-4-3 will be open as well. So this just makes a lot of sense from the road play. The 3-1 is really nice for us as well. That's probably the best shot there for Agron.
Yeah, you don't want to be involved in 2 races at once, of course. So you don't want to be racing for both the 8-4 and the 9-4-3. You have really good win the 8-4 race, because you just need a 6 or a 9 to get the wood that you need, and Green needs a 5. And even if you lose that race, it's still not the end of the world. You got a good amount of production. You got a 3 hex expansion spot. You have a solid expansion spot onto a 3-1 port, doubling up on a 6.
Yep.
You've got solid options even without the 8-4, but you have really good chances to win the race to the 8-4 anyways.
And one last thing, I think we can move on to the next one, and then we'll play the game here. Is we found this because we calculated it, right? Like we didn't just say, okay, take this and take this. I mean, we sat down and said, what if we take the 5-4-11, and what's the sequence of, how does it pair out for green? How does it pair out for blue? And this is a habit that I think any great player can get into, is doing those calculations. And the more you do it, the faster and better you get at being more accurate with it. It also helps to have good players too, right? Because sometimes, the newer players are complete wild cards to what they're going to do. But generally speaking, we can get a sense of what's going to be the best calculation for us with solid, consistent players, which is all these players are. All right, so I like what you're thinking there. All right, we've got 2 more boards. This one was a little bit of a tricky one here. I mean, we don't have to go too deep into this board, Anora, because I feel like there wasn't really a lot of guidance. It was just like, here's the board. Did we lose the stream? What, are we good?
Did stream? No, okay, never mind. Sorry, I just saw the loading bar and everything went quiet. Thought we lost the stream again.
We're not losing. We're not losing the stream today.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Farmer says 1. Okay.
1.
We're good,
Yeah.
we're good.
Quick.
We're good. Okay.
All right. All right.
Sorry.
This is just a note. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this board in just because I feel like there wasn't a lot of guidance from Rudix on this. But essentially, in red, he was asking, "Hey, did I make the right placement?" I think he was 4th here, and we looked at it and we felt like he played it really well. It made a lot of sense. He took advantage of the space, and this was all based on calculation, pointing right here, which was a really good play from him. Maybe we can look at this board another time. I don't want to spend more time because we do have one more board that I think is a little bit more exciting. Was there any points you wanted to make on this one?
I mean, the only we analyzed this board for like half an hour, and blue played really strangely, and red, who was asking the question, played really well, and we liked what he did. there were a couple things that we said about, oh, it could have pointed a road this way, could have pointed a road that way, but it was really kind of splitting hairs. I'm trying to find if there was anything that we needed to talk about. The road to the right at the top, Drew's a big fan of. I think it was kind of 50-50 pointing up or down. I think both were pretty good.
Yeah.
It's mostly the road at the bottom. Pointing to the right wasn't really that great. Pointed left to try to get the 5-4
Was
was
an option.
maybe a little bit better. But I mean, it's being really nitpicky if you're trying to find flaws with the setup that he went with. If he had played this setup and I was in voice chat with him, I would not have said any. Like, I would not have said, "Oh, you should have done this." I'm trying to talk about strategy. I would have just like watched and seen what happened. Like I wouldn't really have any complaints about this.
Also, to be fair, we weren't given any real guidance on this board, so it's just like, here's the board. We're like, oh, okay. So we would love to be able to take a look. I mean, any board that comes our way, we are looking at them. We're spending time with them. But if you can give us some kind of heads up, or if you can get pre-placement photos, that's super helpful. Or at least let us know what was the ordering, so we know how it placed out.
And any boards that you want to submit, if anybody doesn't know exactly what we're talking about, there's a community classes channel on the Catan community Discord, and in there's a sub channel called Strategy Screenshots. You just post something, give as much information as you like. We use pretty much all of it, and it doesn't have to be of just placements. Like, do it of anything. Give us, I just got I got my city and my port, and I don't know what to do now. I'm kind of just getting cards coming in and seeing what I can spend the cards on. I don't have a plan. What should my plan be? Make a submission like that. You know, say, oh, I was planning on going for army, but then so and so just out of the blue just bought 5 nights in a row, and I only have one. Should I shift my my win condition now? You know, any kinds of questions. It doesn't have to be placements. We get a lot of placements, but it doesn't have to be placements.
We also got a lot of CK placements. I'm like, man,
That's true. Yeah.
Come
so
on, what
people
do we...
give CK. It's like, this is a base masterclass. We can't talk about an entirely different game mode.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. All right, so this is the final one, and then we're gonna get into the playthrough with Honor and myself, which is gonna be a lot of fun. And I thought this was fitting to end with the legend delighted. So this was actually a final, which he won. So I'm gonna little spoilers there, but he's in third placement. And essentially, what we found was there was two placement ideas that kind of forced. No matter if he takes one, it forces another. If he takes the other, then it does the opposite, right? It forces the other option. So it was really a case of which one do you want to force the most? And Nora, do you recall? I mean, I have the placements here. Do you recall the ones that we discussed?
So we liked the 8-4-10 quite a bit because of the high production and the the good ports that were there.
Yep.
Well, the good port singular, and the wood port.
Also, alternative is to take the 10, 4 or 5, right?
Yeah. There was some good strategy for that as well. And then there's also 6-9-3 is the other spot that really draws attention.
Yeah. So I think we agreed. I apologize to interrupt you real quick, but I think we agreed third is taking one of these options.
Yes.
Right. That was kind of the agreement. It was like, okay, we take one, and then it's going to force essentially the options down the road.
Yeah. Fourth, we'll take the other one, just because of the strength of the two spots relative to everything else. And basically, if you take the 8-4-10 or the 5-4-10, but just for brevity, I'm going to say keep saying the 8-4-10. If you take the 8-4-10, Fourth will take the 6-9-3, and they'll pair it with probably this one of the 6-3-11s, whether it's the one with the wood, which it probably would be, or if they decided they wanted to go double sheep for whatever reason.
Like this.
They're gonna be taking that setup, and then that's going to leave you with the 8-4-3. And when you analyze it pretty deeply, you can find various advantages to both spots. Looks like you've probably got Squash says the immediate table talk in the game was so funny. But yeah, this is from a YouTube video which you can find.
Yeah.
And what we realized was if you take 693, it basically forces exactly the opposite, where fourth is going to be taking the 8410, and then they're going to be going on to that 843, and then you will be left with the 6311. So basically, the question was, which one did you want? Which one ends up being better? When you place out, we generally found that the 61112 was open position a lot more.
Cool.
Well,
Like
not a
this.
lot more. Just we liked it more enough that we decided that even though our initial gut had told us that the 8410 was a better spot than the 693, we ended up changing our minds after analyzing for a while. And thought that the 693 was probably better because you could trade, basically swap your position with fourth. And this is why actually a lot of people will say, if you ask experienced players, especially back in the day, like 2 years ago, you'd ask people what's the best placement spot, and they'd say third because third, you know, has fourth by the leash. You get to basically tell fourth what to do by what you leave them. So as third, there's these two good setups, and you get to pick which one you want to have and which one you want fourth to have. And it gets like slightly different variants if you place on the 4-5-10 as opposed to the 8-4-10. Biggest impact of the 4-5-10, I think, is that it leaves the 8-3-4 open.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and that has a pretty big impact for what's going to be available for first and second coming back.
Well, that was also
So
what happened in the game was that Grub took the 5-4-10, leaving the 8-4-3 open, and it just for White to get the 6-9-5 and 8-4-3 is that's pretty wacky in my opinion.
yeah, it is pretty nuts, and he got to use that wood port, put that wood port to full effect as well.
So yeah, I mean, this was just a situation where again we looked at the calculations and it was you take one, and then essentially the other player is forced to take the other. So in third, you have that option to say, okay, I can force what fourth's going to have. Do I want the 6-9-3 or do I want the this little area down here on the 4-10-8? And I think we found the 6-9-3 was just a little bit more flexible, a little bit better for third here because you're going to play off the 6-3-11. Now, actually, what's interesting is Dylan, if I recall in the video, he actually took the 6-11-12 because he was concerned he might lose the 3-1. So that's an interesting insight. I think there's probably some merit to that as well. To say, hey, if I lose the 3-1 port, then I can get a 3-1 here at the bottom.
And by the way, Nora, White never got the wood port. Grub plowed him to the wood port.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, but it's just the theory, the
Yeah.
idea that
He
you
gets
would
the
have
wood
this
port, the sheep
available
port.
to
Yeah,
you.
it's
Yeah.
I did watch the game, but this is just the idea of what you can do with this setup. Because if you have this 6-9-5 with the 8-4-3, you've got a doubling up on sheep at a wood port when you have 7 points of wood on an ore wheat sheep setup, and then you also have doubling up on that wood then to put you on the sheep port, which is really really well complementing um, um, ports. And then you also have the opportunity to double up on an unblockable ore to get the 3-1 port. So basically, just the whole port resource situation was just, you know, very very scary for White when you shift that 8-4-10 over to the 5-4-10.
yeah, and that's something you just have to keep in mind when you make those decisions. It's like, what are you getting and what are you giving up, right? Because I think there's probably a stronger case to go 4-10-8, so you don't leave this 8-3-4 open, but then you also leave the 5-4-11 open. So it's funny how things work out that way. Cool. So I think what was interesting is Dylan found this idea. I thought he placed it really well. He won the tournament. So, we found the tournament winning idea, I suppose. Cool. So that's the boards of the week. Of course, anyone that has any other boards, please get in the habit. I mean, if you start a position, it looks like an interesting board, take a screenshot of it. Right. That's something I try to do. Is I'll take a screenshot before any placements. I'll take one during my turn. I'll take one at the end. And that way I'm starting to catalog all these different screenshots that I can evaluate or use as part of, training. So
and take some in the mid game, because that's honestly probably the part where I feel like the most people struggle, get pretty directionless, and also that's what we're going to be talking about in the next couple weeks. So So
Yep.
that's like those are going to be really well timed if you find yourself in a tough situation in the mid game, or if you just don't know what to do. Take a screenshot, send it into strategy screenshots.
Or DM us, one of the options. That's
Yeah, DMS will make sure to direct you to the right place.
cool. Honora, I think it's game time. Right? We've talked a lot of theory. We've shown a
Yeah.
lot of boards here. I think it would be good to have you play some games, have us talk through different positions. You get my perspective, your perspective. For this first game, we're gonna have Honora driving, which means
I may need to pass you to driving, unfortunately, but I will be here to commentate. I just since these games
Oh.
sometimes take an hour and a half, and when they go long, because we do so much talking, um, it'll be 11 o'clock here, and I'm not at home, so.
All right, well, that's fine. I will get my setup together here.
All right.
If you can maybe
I'll
start a
get you
game.
I'll get you the game room here.
Perfect.
Here.
Okay, so bear with me, everyone. I'm going to switch over to. This should. Everyone see the dandy screen? Calling a screen. Close the window.
Yep, I see it. I see it.
Perfect.
All right, and everybody's in, so let me get out
oh
of
my
here
God.
so that you can have it.
Oh my God. All right, so how about this? I'll let you, since you might have to leave, I'll let you maybe start the placements, and then I can obviously play it out.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and anybody who's playing in the game, we got Donnie Puzzles and Squash playing. You're welcome to stick around in voice chat if you want to. We are going to be talking about our cards and stuff, so that so we can properly interact with the chat here. So if you do elect to stick around, please don't to try to let yourself be affected by information that you shouldn't have and all that stuff, just so we can try to have a
All right.
as pure of a game as
Bye, stream. Remember, I play dirty. Thanks, Puzzles. All right. Like I said, I'm gonna let you drive at the beginning, and then
okay.
you get to kind of play with fourth position. What do you see here? What looks good?
Yeah. Okay, so first thing you always want to do when you see a new board is look at look at the supply and demand. Okay, we have abysmally low ore. This is a very low ore game. I see a lot of wheat. I see a lot of sheep. Very low brick as well, and wood is fairly middling. But the wood is also clumped around that 5, 9, 10 spot.
Mhm.
So this is definitely one where we're going to be trying to see what kind of advantage we can create, because this is not going to be a board where everybody's going to have a balanced setup. So Crane says 5, 9, 10 first pick slam dunk. Trust me. Yeah. So I mean, 5, 9, 10 should be catching basically everybody's eyes first, because it's an all-rate sheep spot. It's a high production spot. I mean, this is the kind of spot that everybody's eyes are drawn to, and it is definitely good. Is going to be impactful. Who controls the wood on this board? Most people are probably going to get access to some decent wheat. You also have a desert that is not on the coast, so there's not going to be a ton of space. We want to take a look at the ports. 3-to-1 ports, all on the northeast part.
No, I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. 3-to-1 ports are all on the northeast part of the board. So that is impactful. And now the wood port is also right next to the 5, 9, 10. So this is obviously the ore wheat sheep spots are definitely important here, but also the control of that wood is going to be pretty impactful. It's not that nobody else is going to get wood access, not what I'm saying, but because you are next to the wood port, and because it is a very clumped resource, that is impactful.
All right.
Now let's take a look at what some of the chat has said. See, talking about how great the 5, 9, 10 in the north is. Yeah, of course. Yeah. 5, 9, 10 is great. So the other 5, 9, 10 in the south immediately catches my eye, Drew.
Okay.
I don't see serious risk for the 8, 10 being taken, so there's not really any risk that we're going to be blocked, and of course, if no, we're not going to be raced for this wood port. The question. So then Crane says, your question is, can we get away with the 4-5-10 or not? And that is the second question.
Yeah.
Will anybody be placing directly onto this 9-10? If we look at people coming back, I find it very unlikely that Donnie's going to be placing there, or puzzles. That does not look conducive to a good setup to
And
me.
I don't think squash would either.
I don't think Squash might place 5-9-12 or something like that. He may go for that wood there, but I don't think he would race, especially if we're placing on 4-5-10. It's going to be our second placement. We get the free road, right? So it'd be a losing race for him.
Yep.
There's an or wheat sheep spot available in the north. So there's some really, really good options for us here, I think. So the thing that catches my eye right now is playing 8-4-3 with the 4-5-10, and Drew, I'm curious what you think about that.
I like either
It's
that
probably
the
probably
6-3-11.
people's.
The biggest thing for me is the road network too here, right? Because the problem with the 8-4-3 is your road network's broken. Now you do get the advantage of getting to an extra port because with the 6-3-11 you're only playing off the wood port, but it's a really strong port for us. And I think the ability to go to something like the 9-11, even go out to the 6-2 and build around this way is actually very interesting to me. But I'm gonna let you choose, and I'm gonna do the best I can.
Yeah, I think there are also actually.
Well, we do have 30 seconds.
I think there are also 6-5-12 ideas.
Yep. Well, that's kind of like one of the side-by-side ideas, right? Where you go something like 11-12.
I think I would value 6-5-12 over 6-3-11. We're
All right.
mostly going to be.
So let's pick the wheat spot, because I think we agree we want one of these spots, right? So you choose.
I think 6-5-12 is best because it staves people away from the wood port, so that squash doesn't have any kind of ideas of going 9-5-12.
Okay,
and
so
it also helps us lock down a lot of wood here.
Okay, so where do you want to go? 11-12 or 9-12?
I think first of all, I think it's not super impactful, but probably 11-12. 9. I mean, the ore port doesn't do anything for us here, and the 11-12 will allow us to build our roads in a direction that we can connect and not have wasted roads.
Okay. And then I think we're agreeing we're taking the road in hand, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is a very me kind of setup, right? And the way we look at it, I think this spot's going to go. I mean, essentially these ore and wheat spots are going to go, and then I think Donnie might just take the 6-3. That's what I'm thinking.
So Crane says maybe that actually puts a guy on the port, and
I think it's unlikely.
I also think it's unlikely because the person most likely to end up going on a port is Donnie, and 10-9 I don't think is good enough here. I mean, there's going to be either an 8-10 3-1 port available in the north, or the 8-4 on the other side, right? Also 3-1 port. Both of those are there's an ore sheep and an ore wheat and a sheep wheat. Both of those are going to be better for almost anybody who's thinking about placing on a port than the 9-10.
I mean, the 6-3 is by far the better port, I think. If you really want to take advantage of a port, then 6-3, or even 8-4 is an interesting idea.
Yeah, and you also with 6-3 you also have road, like, safe expansion to the 6-2. Excuse me. To strengthen your sheep port, your wheat port. Man, I'm just saying all the wrong resources now.
I think it makes a lot of sense here to go 6-3, 6-3-11, right? Point left.
Puzzles. Oh yeah, almost certainly. It's just kind of like a no-brainer.
Now there is a disadvantage here, which is we are playing off of one port. And this, as much as I enjoy these kind of setups, that is kind of my thing. Is the flexibility is hit or miss here. But once we get on the 9, I feel like we're doing much better, because we could effectively be killed by just a solo block on the 5.
Yeah, Now, so this is also a situation where we would normally want to be in voice with Donnie. Objectively, the 10-9 is not the best. Is not the best spot for him. I don't think 8-4 is better for him, and I think 6-3 is better for him. But this is one of the situations when to be on voice chat with him and talk with him. Maybe we can trade him a wood for, if he's really thinking about going to the 9-10, we can offer him a resource that's going to be pretty rare.
I will say this too, Honora. I mean, one thing, we are leaving a really good setup, I think, for Red here, right? He has essentially 3-1 dominance. He's got 3-3-1 ports.
That's true.
The 8-4 is available to them, which is very strong production. And then they have kind of an unblockable or we cheap. So that could be a consideration because we knew essentially these spots were going to get taken. If we look at the board a little deeply and say, like, is that maybe what we want?
Well, he's also going to be hit by basically every single robber. It's going to be on the 10 or it's going to be on the 6. It's going to be on the 6 wheat. Like every time Donnie rolls a 7, it's going on the 6 wheat, right? So
yeah, but that's
not,
okay. I think the 6 will stay protected.
Yeah, it'll be protected by the rest of us, of course.
Yeah, and actually, I don't even know if the 6 is the right block. Because I think really for Donnie, the big advantage he has is the 10 or. Like
That's
maybe
true.
he might want to put some pressure on the 3 to make sure that, essentially, if the 3's blocked, he's the only person getting or with red. Because I can see a world where red outpaces him on development cards in an army. Or he just hits a sheep, right? If he feels red is in a really strong position. The road in hand of 411. It's interesting. I think I really think for black's position, maybe 6-3 is better. But we have kind of messed the sport up in a fun way.
Best thing about the 6-5-12 placement
There we go.
is that it seriously limits everybody else's ability to even get wood in the first. I mean, puzzles is on 3 and the 11.
All right, so
we're gonna have the 5 and the 9 to ourselves.
Question is, where do we want to go first? Probably the wood port.
Yeah, it's the wood port, and there's not really any reason to save here. We don't want to risk the brick getting stolen, and we don't want to get closer to 7. Drew knows that I'm a big fan of tactically saving cards and not committing roads when it's not the perfect time to do so. But there's no reason to save here. There's just no advantage.
Who has a brick here? I don't think anybody has a brick.
Nobody. No, nobody has a brick.
Okay, yeah.
Kumbaloco says red is probably the first one to city up. Yep.
Probably.
Yeah, he probably is.
Which is good.
He's got 2 ore to start. He's also gonna get probably gang robbed for his ore and early on.
Also, I think we might get put in a position where our wood could be a target if people need it. Man, these rolls are killing us here.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
But this is okay. This is okay. I think from a pacing perspective, we shouldn't be getting. Oh my goodness, was that the 4th 3? Was that 3, 3, 3? All right. Well, there goes our value on the wood.
Yeah, that's incredible.
All right, we need some 7s. Oh man. Wait, do we have the dice messed up? All right. We need balanced dice.
Where's Juan? Somebody's hacking. Puzzles is hacking.
Nice 3, guys.
This is pretty crazy. Crazy rolls.
I think it's okay. It's okay. And
but
so
I mean,
like
we'll still probably fine here because we don't have any solid competition for road.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of space.
We don't have any kind of races that this crazy rolling is costing us a race. Like we're fine there. We've got really good production. We've got good resource diversity. We've got the good port set up for us and safe expansion spots. Like we are still in a position to where if the pacing benefits us like it is right now, where we're getting off to really, really slow starts, the base pacing benefits us, so much.
Oh. Then you gotta be very careful one for ones here when someone has a down dev and 13 cards. Yeah, I don't like
Oh yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was
I mean, we know that the 3 just rolled 4 or 5 times and he's got ore in his hand.
yeah, he's gonna city here, of course.
Well,
Should be immediately obvious after the 4 to
wait,
1
do you need wood here, Squash? No, we need all right, we need a wheat. Donnie, you have a wheat?
He's not there. They're not in. They're not listening. You gotta use chat if you're gonna talk to them.
No wheat. Well, I think Puzzles has a brick, and I kind of want to take that from him.
Yeah, Puzzles just pulled 2 brick with the.
So
with
I
the,
think the 3 makes a lot of sense.
it makes sense because he just spent it, and so they are lacking again.
Yeah, let's see if we can snag a brick. Hey, not the world's worst pull. We desperately need. There we go. All right. We get a couple 12s, a couple 6s. Now, I think it's fair to say something like the 10 ore is a fantastic block here.
Yeah.
So we know half his hand is brick. Is that correct?
With Puzzles, yes, half of his hand is brick.
Okay.
He just pulled. He just had that 4 roll right after he built his city here. Hasn't spent it. You didn't steal it.
Yeah.
So.
Is Donnie? He's not in VC. No. All right, we got to get on this 9.
Yeah.
All right. So what is your priority here, right? So now essentially the wood port is online. We've got a lot more flexibility. What's your order of operations, like priority, right? Because we have 11, 12. That's definitely an option. I think
You
a
have the
city could
411 as well.
city could be an option. 411. Yep.
Yep, city is an option. Even the 810, although I think it's probably weaker than the other options, the biggest advantage of the 411 would be that it would essentially secure longest road. It would mean that Puzzles would no longer be able to have any kind of connecting ideas. So normally with port play, I heavily value cities because you need to make twice as many cards as everybody else does to get the cards that you want and need.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Normally, I heavily value cities. However, this is not the best ports setup from a citying perspective because no matter where you put your city, you're only going to get 4 extra points of your port material. Cities are great for other reasons. They're great for if you to get 2 brick on the 4, to get 2 wheat from the 6. Like this. These are great reasons to have a city. Doesn't actually increase the strength of the port all that much.
So there might be a case here. All right, so I'm gonna let you guide this hand. I think I know what I would want to do. Also, I do like the 11-12. I think the ability to have a 1-12 go off could be huge for us, and the 11 brick just adds that little extra touch of brick in our hand.
I think I like the 11-12 right now.
So I know Squash actually has 2 brick. He doesn't need 2 brick. He only needs 1. So we're going to do that with him. Is there... I think probably just drop the road, right? I mean, we could...
There's no reason to hold here. There's no reason to hold here.
Yeah.
I mean, you drop the road because that way, Squash can't get any kind of ideas about, pulls a dev, gets a road builder, thinks, well, let me secure this 11-12 for whatever reason. There's no advantage to saving the road in that.
Yeah, and I think as long as we have wood in our hands, I mean, that kind of disincentivizes Puzzle to rob us because he doesn't need a lot of wood, right? He needs really OWS materials, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be mainly his game.
Farmer liked the 411 idea, which I think was I think it's a kind of a toss up. 1112 is closer, but Crane says the problem is going for 411 this early means killing Purple's road idea is most likely and putting a target on your back. And that's true.
I also don't know if we're gonna get it. I think if we make a rush of 411, I think
Yes.
puzzles.
Now, if it was 411, you would not commit a road. You would hold. Maybe you still take that trade with Squash, but you would definitely hold until you could get there right away. Especially with how many cards Puzzles is pulling in for no apparent reason. Although, to be fair, he may have just, I didn't actually see what he passed with on his last turn. And he does have a habit of passing with a lot of cards. Now, Farmer says, I like 912 better than 1112. I do quite fond of 1112. Basically unblockable. Do not underestimate the power of doubling up on a 12.
Yeah, we just
true,
need it
it
to
may
roll
never-
once or twice, right? I mean, that's going to be the kicker.
Well, I mean, it rolls once instant city when you've got a port set up, and it also loops us around the 12 with the
Yeah, drop
ideas
a
of
road here.
building to the 912 and then connecting on the other side of the 9, and it gets
Eight
us the
sheep.
brick to help us with that.
No, dude, 8 sheep. So this is actually a big mistake. I don't think it really hurts me more than it hurts puzzles here, right?
But Puzzles didn't have any cards, so you wouldn't get to steal anything.
But I still think giving him the ability to have this 8 roll is probably detrimental at this point.
Yeah. I would agree, but I understand why he took the 4, because of the 0 cards.
Yeah, but I just don't think that's. I understand the logic behind it, but right now we have to stop rolls from coming in, and I think giving him the ability to get essentially 2/3 of a development card on 1 roll versus getting 2 brick is, yeah, that is monstrous. And this is also, you have to block based on where you're going to get the most value. And I think for him, it's the puzzles doesn't give a shit about the brick anymore. Like he wants to buy development cards, and that's what he's doing. Too early for solo blocks.
Puzzles is the man to beat here because of those 3s going off in his early city, and now him having the port locked down. So yeah, I'm with Crane here. Crane says I'm not particularly against blocking 4 brick there to get a steal, but I get it. Like, yeah, and I'm kind of with him. Not the best block, I don't think. I think you solo there even when you're not getting a card. Probably in a situation like that, you say, you try, if you're on voice with them, he would try to milk a trade from Drew. Say like, hey, give me a wood for fill in the blank, and
Yeah.
so I can really justify going for this 0 card steal, for this zero steal block, So
Interesting position too with puzzles trying to make a deal. I think at this point you can't, dealing with the devil, right? Like he's already so far ahead, and he's trying to make deals to put him even further ahead. I don't see what you're getting out of that makes any sense.
yeah. Now Longhorn doesn't think it's a mistake. He says it's too early to solo block.
No, it is 100% the right play.
It's never too early to solo block. People avoid it for a diplomacy idea, but it's never too early to solo block, and especially when he's already got city up and running on a port with good resource diversity and expansion spots available to him. He's in a very, very strong position and has 2 devs. This is a position that you have to try to stomp out.
Why is Donnie doing this? I think this is a mistake.
He wants puzzles to self block.
Oh man, we're trying to provide a reasonable game here, Donnie. Okay.
What's it doing for the memes? Oh man.
So now he's giving him a development card for the wheat.
Yeah, it's essentially a free. He essentially just gets a free knight play here, and it certainly means that puzzles uh, has two add 2 knights, right? So this is one of those situations where you can glean information about
Yeah.
about puzzles is about puzzles is devs, because he decided after moving the robber already on his 7, he decided, okay, I'm going to play an aggressive knight. Almost certainly means that he had 2 knights in his hand. He only had one, he'd want to save it.
I think this is not a. I mean, we have to assume Donnie has knights, and I don't see why he's encouraging puzzles to play knights, and then try to give him more.
Yeah. Well, so farm of the self block was the deal. The idea was
All right. So
puzzles.
Donnie essentially screwed all of us there in that process.
Oh man.
Play the knight.
So the self block was the deal. Donnie Puzzle said he'd move the robber to where Donnie wanted him to if Donnie would trade him a wheat. Donnie went all non-binding agreement.
Yeah.
Not do so. And that is certainly a revenge.
All right. It has to be on the a sheep. Sheep. That works too. All right. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of Okay, we're a few rolls away. I don't know. It's a weird deal for Donnie to make. Just put on the sheep, Donnie.
No, yeah, I'm
Come
not
on,
a fan
man.
of it either.
Sheep.
Puzzle's still having 0 cards. It's been every single time, and you are getting hit really hard.
Yeah.
For not having.
So there is a potential for us here to get the settle, or we can pop, right? We don't have enough for the city unless we make a deal.
Yeah. See if you can come up with any kind of deal here. I mean, you need to make a deal for the settle anyways, so see if you can get a hold of wheat here first off. But the rolls have been pretty scant. If you can't get anything, I do think this is a situation where we pop. I generally feel uncomfortable with popping to save my hand when it wasn't a plan yet, but this is one of those situations where you definitely would do it, I think.
Oh. Well, this is not for the settle. Okay. All right, so I mean, we take the city, right? I don't think there's a lot of consideration here. I mean, asking for 2 ore, you can't really assume that's a settle. So I think we take it. Well, I thought he was referring to the sheep for wheat. So 4, 5, 10, right?
Yeah. I think so. You would want to do 6, 5, 12 in a lot of situations. He said non-binding.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna do that to him. You know what I mean? But he's getting a taste of his own medicine now. I asked for 2 ore. I mean, I think he can assume that.
I mean, you don't make any ore. Like, how could you possibly make a settle out of that?
Oh,
right?
What is he doing? Trading. This game is all sorts of messed up right now.
Yeah, well, it's still good, although to go through a game like this, when there are fairly hectic things happening, because these can be some of the toughest games to deal with. You'll hear people, experienced players saying like, oh, I don't like playing with inexperienced players because they play unconventionally. Not to say that Donnie's an experienced player. He is experienced in his own right. That he is playing like one right now.
Also, does it make any sense for us to be solo blocked here, or am I missing something?
I don't think it makes sense. No, Puzzles is the serious threat here, but it was Puzzles who blocked you, right? So from Puzzles' perspective, maybe he hits the 5 because you have road threats.
Yeah, I mean, Puzzles is just winning this game. Yeah, it's a little disappointing. I think Donnie's really ruined this this game, the dynamic of it. Because I think in a normal situation, it wouldn't have played out this way.
I don't like to say that it's been ruined, but because you need to learn like not you, Drew, but like it's just as useful to learn how to deal with abnormal situations.
Oh, of course, of course.
So take this and we deal with it exactly, however possible. The puzzle is in a super strong spot here. So now we take this opportunity to say, how do we deal with a runaway player? We have puzzles in this situation. Got 2 down devs. He's tied with the, in the race for army from a knights played so far perspective. He's threatening to take road and already at 5 with a port. Like, what are your ideas here for how to try to contain puzzles, Drew? What's your?
Well, we've got to make a play on road. That's for certain, right? I'm almost thinking it might be worth trying to go on this 3-1 around here, because we're gonna need a road network.
Well, I think our road network can go south though, right? Like we
Like
could take
around
our
this
road
way.
network to the 9-12, right?
We could. My only concern is what if Puzzles tries to cut this here? Because ideally we want to wrap around the 5, right, and then go for the connect here.
Yeah.
Is Puzzles at
But
7?
we also have the ability to loop down from the city towards the 8-10,
Yeah,
prevent him from expanding.
this is true as well. I mean, we could also do the opposite though. We could go to the 3-1 this way and then wrap around the 9 and then connect. Like for instance, if we did somehow, let's say, get a bunch of wood and we could plow even to the 8-4, it might be a pipe dream, to be honest with you. But I do like the 3-1, and then obviously you playing the road that game that way. But we've got to do something here soon.
Yeah. We don't really have any options right now, I don't think.
Yeah. A 5 would be amazing. No 7.
Oh yeah, 5 would be great for us. 5 is obviously the role that we're hoping for here. Donnie is not a major threat right now, and
Yeah.
he's the only other person who benefits from the 5. The big hope is that Puzzles does not have a knight here, but obviously we don't want him to have 2 VPs. He's really, really dangerous there.
No, I do think, I mean, Donnie he needs a pop here.
He's gonna city 9-5-10.
Okay.
Now, maybe he should have.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was his opportunity to potentially.
Yeah, I think he needed to compete for army here, but he definitely didn't feel like he could afford to.
I mean, I get the city on the 9-5-10.
Yeah, he feels like
yeah, this is
it's
unfortunate.
going. Kelly doesn't like all the talk about Downey, and I would agree with that. But
oh, I know he's a great player, but I mean the position's been
yeah, but it
trashed a little
is
bit.
very,
Yeah, I mean
yeah.
it's not even a question there. All right, well now we're getting some pops going. I need wood. Also, even an orb. We can pick up a VP here.
I'm not sure there's any wood on the board right now.
Yeah. Another question.
I think that
Don't
there's
feed
not.
Drew. Yeah. My 4th point.
Yeah.
Um,
It's Puzzles' game to lose. Squash will make a run for army now. If he can hold army away from Puzzles, then the game has potential to continue.
I think that's so funny.
Ooh, nice 12. Yeah, like that 12.
I think this is in general not too bad for us. I mean, I'd rather have squash. We got to survive here. You're going to survive.
Yeah, I mean anybody who buys devs that is not puzzles is helping the situation.
Okay.
5 really hurts though.
So we've actually got settle pop. We can. In the very least, we should be able to pop here. I think it's actually pretty hilarious that puzzles is table talking me at 4 points.
Yeah.
Like what do you do not feed me. Also in this position we definitely need we need a wood here. Oof. Okay. Probably actually hold on to the brick, I think. Or do we
We want to hold one of them for sure, yeah.
But do we want to also go for the pop? I think we kind of need to.
Yeah, we need to pop here. We need to pop here. We need to pull anything other than a knight. I mean, knight would be
Probably the
mini
3.
disaster.
Also the 9 I think is pretty good with Donnie potentially moving it back. I think we need to hit puzzles as much as we can here, right?
Yeah. Puzzles is 100% the prop, yeah.
Okay.
Donnie moving it. He may not have another knight though.
All right. Perfect. So now there's a question of okay, so Donnie doesn't move it.
VP is exactly what we see. Yeah, I wasn't sure Donnie would have a knight here because I believe he's been holding that. Yeah, maybe I miscounted that.
Move. Okay. Wait. Oh, squash takes it. Okay.
Yep.
So now do we go for the settle or do we try to take road? I'm gonna let you decide.
I like settle here mostly from a pacing perspective because if we take road, we just replace puzzles.
Actually, the connect doesn't give us road anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Also, if the 12 pops, we're living our best life. Yeah. But I mean, he potentially could be at 9 points, and that is the problem. And I think this is why you don't solo block me in that position, right? Like, clearly, you need to put some pressure on the guy that's taking away army.
Yeah. Like he can be at 9 here, and we play with fire, right? You also consider. Let's suppose he is at 9 away road. Like he was at 0 cards. Yes, it's true. He probably won't be able to win. 2 turns from now. He wasn't going to be able to win this turn, regardless. But not delay the win by at least an extra turn. But what are our chances still like? Like he still would have been holding 2 VPs, with his setup, and it just would have been very difficult for us to get, I think any kind of traction. As it stands, he's gonna have so much robber attention. He takes it all away from us.
Okay. Now there is an interesting story here, right? Do we build around the 9 and prepare for a road steal?
I like going to the 9-12 here, although the way that you would build to that, I think, would be around the ore port, because that would not. I guess no. I mean, he's already got road, but I mean, it keeps your number of contiguous roads minimal. So, yeah, I can see that. But there's
if we can get an extra wood here, I don't think.
I don't think there's any out there right now. But either way, if we did just build one road and passed, which would be okay.
Okay, so you want to build down to the 9-12.
Yes, I think the 9-12 is the way to go here.
Okay. And then that way, if a 5 does roll, we connect for longest road.
Yes.
Also, the 9 is not too bad either. Yeah, this 5 solo block really killed your game. Yeah, I understand why he did it, but I think it was a little bit of an oversight. But we're still in this. I mean, we've actually got the way these setups usually work. I'm gonna scrap. I think we need to really set up for the road steal here.
Yes.
And there's plenty of sheep here.
Very unfortunate 7 there.
It's okay. It's okay.
I think that you got to pay really close attention to puzzles.
Of course. I mean, we
But-
assume he's at 8. Oh, this is unfortunate these nights. That's perfect.
Yeah.
All right, and we have the guaranteed road steal. The question is, do we take it? Because
I don't think so. No, I don't think we do.
because
I'm looking at puzzles here. On 8, there's no ore. Doesn't have any settle spots set up. His down dev is almost certainly a VP, and if it's not a VP, then he's not at 8.
correct.
I think road is safe in his hand.
There is a. So we could just road gives us what 2 brick, 4 wood, maybe like a road for a sheep, and we settle. That puts us at 7 road. Longest road for 9.
If we have road settle, I like it more than going ahead and connecting. But I need to go. Actually, I'm at the end of my time here. So, if the stream's still going when I get home, then I'll see you guys then. But otherwise, I'll catch the rest of the VOD. So,
Okay, man. We appreciate it.
thanks everybody for sticking around in chat and asking questions and stuff. And good luck in your future games.
Thanks, Honora. We appreciate you, buddy.
Yep.
Okay, so Honora is taken off here. I do think I'd rather kind of keep a little bit of the pressure on. I could take road now. Not important. Yeah, I agree. It's not important. And I kind of like the fact that he's getting hit here. So we're just gonna pass. I mean, we could port, but it's a little unnecessary right now. I kind of like the flexibility of our hand. Perfect. Perfect. And let's see here. All right, let me catch up with chat, everyone. With your luck, this game, here comes a 7. Donnie pulls a second mono. And this is okay. I think from a pacing perspective, we're sitting really nicely. Road is still kind of sitting in our back pocket a little bit if we want to take it. I mean, of course, puzzles could... Oof, what is this all for road settle? So now we're putting Donnie at 7 points, which is very interesting. Maybe 8 points even. Nice play. Oh man, look at the brick situation here. Oh my goodness. Can we just win? I think we just take road here. 1, 2, 3. What if we settle? Can we settle and take road? Is that an option? There are 2 roads. I think we'll just take road at this point. Now we got 2 settle spots here. We got a very good road. And that's okay. Completely okay if we lose. I don't think Puzzles has a road builder. He probably would have played a long time ago. And now we're set up potentially for a double settle for the win. And I don't think anybody's close. I mean, we can assume Donnie's probably at 7, maybe with a knight, because I think there's some still knights out there, maybe with a road builder. Yeah, also we don't want red taking road. We want to try to eliminate some of the challenges. I mean, Donnie could be going to 9 here if he drops a city. But we have actually some potential rolls here, like a 4 and a 6 and a 5. Should get us in the money. All right. Well, there's one settle for sure. And I think a 10 gives us the other settle. Thing with puzzles is he had a lot of brick in his hand. I think he's got like 5 or 6 brick. Dandy, help me plow. Plow me? I think we're good. Donnie could be at 9 points. Donnie could be at 9 points. It's a real problem. All right. So I think we just take 8-10, assess from there. And I'm pretty sure a 5 is winning. A 4 might be winning. 4 is winning. Wow. Okay, let's see what happens here. I think we're almost there. We're a card off, boys and girls. So the question is, we can't pop either. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't think Donnie probably has a knight. I think we just pass and hope that we just get any roll. Yeah. I mean, if we get stolen from, we get stolen from. I know Puzzles has actually a shit ton of brick. That's my concern. Nice block. All right, so now we need some kind of like 9 and 8, or yeah, 9 and 8, 9 and 4. Okay, well, so Donnie is out of settle spots, which is good. Okay. So now almost every roll gives us the opportunity here. Yeah, Squash really, I mean, he got unfortunate devs here. There's no way. I don't see how they feed him 4 roads here. And you can't trade with Donnie. All right, any roll gives us more or less it. All right. So now we have either a wish us luck. Okay, that's the win for sure. Six wheat. GG. It's a tough call. I mean, both Donnie and I are dangerous. I mean, obviously me with the settle spot is a problem. That block. it was a wacky game. I really think Puzzles got a little unlucky. It looked like he was actually about to take Army and Road. And that's a really viable strategy in a lot of boards like this when the rolls are really imbalanced. But we had a really clear plan, right? We wanted to clear space for us. I think we got very lucky with the rolls. The 4 was massive, especially towards the end of the game. The 5 was really big too. 2 has one roll to get the win. Donnie has 30. Oh, 2. It's tough. I mean, I think if they knew my hand, they would realize I'm essentially anything gives me the win there. The thing, the blocking the 10 sheep doesn't matter because I don't have a 3-1 port. So the 8 sheep and the 10 sheep are more or less, it's the same to me. Yeah, that was an interesting game. Also, like, it'd be interesting to talk to Donnie about that and kind of see what his thought was. I guess he wanted to pull a non-binding deal, but I think if he actually held the deal with the 6 block and gave Puzzles another dev, I actually think we lose the game. It's such a fine line there, because I think if he got Army and Road, he just wins. But this is the plan, right? We knew by going side by side, locking the wood, building to the 11, which I think we got maybe once or twice. We had the road network play, we had the production, and we got super lucky pulling the VP. Usually with road setups, almost the most optimal one I've found is to get 1 city, 1 VP, and 5 settles. Because if you don't pull the VP, then you either need to build a second, you just need to build a second city. Because after 5 settles, you get the 9 points. But yeah, I am missing. Well, he didn't say he had 2 winning rolls. He just said, I think he has 2 rolls. Like, so are you scared of Drew's 1 roll, or are you scared of Donnie's 2? And it looks like the VP, like, there's still a lot of VPs to be pulled. Like, so, in the very least, we had a pull opportunity there. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, if I miss my roll, then Donnie has an opportunity for a roll. Like, for instance, if a 6 hits and then a 5 hits, I mean, Donnie can't road settle, but he can probably pull at least once, maybe twice, and that's very dangerous, I think. Yeah, I mean, interesting dynamic there for Puzzles, because he, like I said, he was playing both win conditions, but once the kind of dice settled out after the 3 rolled a bunch of times, he kind of lost both. So that's one of the challenges when you're going for one of those blitzkriegs. But yeah, overall, very interesting game. I think it was played very well. I mean, I think from everybody, a little bit interesting on the 5 wood block. I think obviously in hindsight, it was the right block because we won the game. But I think Puzzles, if he doubled down on development cards and was putting more pressure on red, I think he could have held Army. But then there's the question of what do you do with me, who's dropping roads like a maniac? So it's a super tough situation. You know, we had a game plan up for road, and we really executed on it. Any comments? Anything we maybe missed? And credit to Anor, by the way. I'm kind of sad he wasn't here to share the victory, but this was this was his idea, so credit to him. Your setup, by the way, your setup being road plus 12 or it's a general, yeah, it's a great setup. And the thing is the 12 looks harmless, but we just needed to roll once, and it rolled, I think, twice maybe. Or we got an ore trade and then it rolled the one time, and that's how we got the second ore. Also, to be fair to Donnie, he was saying, you know, when we offered the trade, I think it was sheep for wheat or sheep for wheat. He was like, hey, is this for a settle? I'm like, yeah, that's for a settle. Then he accepted the 2 ore trade. It's like, why would I take 2 ore for a settle? I mean, I wasn't lying. This is also, for people to know as well, this is also a very effective strategy with road. Is I love having these setups where about 80-95% of your production is road based, right? You're getting the wood, the brick, the sheep, the wheat, or whatever, and then you just have this little maybe 11 or a 3 or even a 12 ore, and it's just every once in a while it's popping off, and every time it hits, you know, that's your ability to buy a development card or to potentially drop a city. Those are my favorite road plays because they tend to be very off the radar. Versus if I have a strong wood and brick setup and then I have, let's say, a 9 or a 5 ore, that looks a lot more dangerous because people don't want the road player dropping cities too easily. Cool. Okay, so that's one game. I really appreciate Puzzles, Donnie, and Squash participating there. Really great players, good guys, and just interesting, weird dynamic. I feel like the rolls and the trades just, it was kind of chaos in the beginning stages. It's for selling down a city. Yeah. I didn't think like he had that conversation then, and he decided to trade me the ore. I'm like, I don't know. Again, I think Donnie was playing a little bit for the content side, so I appreciate the humor in the game a little bit as well.